Chapter 55. Tao Hong ran back with an empty lunch box and accidentally bumped into Lulu, who was about to step out of the room. "Silly girl, where's our breakfast? Why did you come back with an empty lunch box?" "Oh no, Miss 3 is really insidious. She went to complain to Master Ho. I just saw her holding on to Master Ho and crying on the way back. I don't know how many bad things she said about Mississippi. Is there such a thing?" Lulu quickly turned around and complained to her master, who was busy eating. "Miss, why did you fall out with her so quickly? She didn't provoke you. How are you going to explain it to Master Ho when he comes later? After all, she hasn't been home for 14 years. Master Ho will definitely feel sorry for her." Yu Xiang waved her hand disapprovingly, but her eyes kept moving towards the door. A quarter of an hour later, Yu Pinyin stepped through the door under the morning light and sat down at the dining table that was filled with breakfast. "This shredded chicken porridge is very delicious. Older brother, do you want some? I'll feed you." Yu Xiang scooped up a spoonful of porridge and blew on it to cool it, then carefully brought it to her older brother's mouth. Her pretty face was pink and rosy, and she was smiling brightly at him while facing the morning sun. The salty smell of the shredded chicken porridge and the sweet smell of peach blossoms and lotus flowers wafted to his nose, greatly increasing his appetite. Yu Pinyin's Adam's apple moved slightly. He finished the porridge with the spoon in his mouth and asked, "One who is unaccountably solicitous is hiding evil intentions. Tell me, what bad things did you do this time? What bad things can I do so early in the morning?" Yu Xiang lowered her head and stuffed a mouthful of porridge into her mouth. Yu Pinyin waited until she finished swallowing before he pinched her chin and turned her pretty face to him. He continued to ask, "Why don't you let Yu Miaoqi get close to me?" Yu Xiang frowned. "I don't like it." "Why not?" "My heart hurts. We're both younger sisters. Why do you feel bad?" "I just feel terrible. My heart is throbbing with pain, just like this." Yu Xiang really felt wronged. She picked up the whip hanging on the armrest of the wheelchair and lightly whipped her brother's arm. She said angrily, "You liar, you said you only like me. You actually scolded me for Yu Miaoqi. Do you know how bad she is? She burned the protective talisman given by the old ancestor. Not only does she hate me, she also hates you. I don't know how much evil water she's hiding in her stomach, and she's planning to pour it out. You clearly told me to stay away from her, but you ran over to get close to her. You big liar." Yu Miaoqi's return had touched her sensitive nerves. She was afraid that one day, Yu Pinyin would like Yu Miaoqi more than her and drive her out. She pretended to be calm on the surface, but once she fell asleep, she would have nightmares about breaking up with her family Yu and being separated from her Yu Pinyin. She couldn't talk about this pain and had nowhere to vent it. This made her, who was already not very obedient, even more anxious. She only needed a little spark to ignite her anger. Yu Pinyin knew that he wouldn't be able to get anything out of her this time. It was still too early to wait for the little girl to understand. He could only hug her on his knees and tightly hold her arms. He didn't know whether to laugh or cry. "When did I scold you? I was just asking a few questions. The one I like the most in my heart is naturally still you. It can't be the most." Yu Xiang stared at him with her big cat eyes and seriously corrected him. "It's only like." Okay. Big brother only likes you." Yu Pinyin chuckled and pressed her delicate cheeks into his chest. His tone became very serious. "If Big Brother also had a brother who was wandering outside, after finding him and bringing him back, would you like him or me?" "Of course I only like Big Brother. Big Brother is the one who gets along with me every day. Big Brother is the one who depends on me. Big Brother is the one who is intimate with me. How could it change because of an outsider?" Yu Xiang answered without hesitation. Yu Pinyin was very satisfied with this answer, especially the definition of outsider. In this way, even if Shen Yuanqi temporarily took Xiang'er away in the future, Xiang'er wouldn't accept him for a while. The one she trusted, depended on, and loved could only be himself. Yu Pinyin was very happy for a moment. He laughed and said, "That's it. Although we have the same blood flowing in our veins, Yu Miaoqi is just a stranger to me." "Silly girl, why are you randomly getting jealous?" Yu Xiang thought for a moment and also laughed. She broke free from her brother's arms and poured a few drops of vinegar on the steamed dumplings. She picked them up and stuffed them into her mouth. She said vaguely, "I like to eat sour dumplings." "It's none of your business." Yu Pinyin chuckled. He hugged her and finished the remaining half of the bowl of porridge. Lu stood outside the window and peeped. His expression alternated between joy and sadness, resentment and anger. Tao Hong was stunned. He thought to himself, "This person is calling me a silly girl, but he's becoming more and more silly." When Yu Miaoqi arrived at the east courtyard, her expression was very natural. She smiled and greeted Yu Siyu. She sat next to her and her eyes stopped on an unfinished veil in the sewing box. She picked it up and chuckled, "Sister, are you embroidering the dowry? Why is there only one veil?" Yu Siyu blushed. She snatched the veil and whispered, "The embroiderer will help with the wedding dress. This veil is simple. I have nothing to do, so I embroider it to pass the time." Yu Miaoqi covered her mouth and joked, "So, sister's wedding date is near. Sister congratulates sister in advance. I wonder who is the son-in-law of our family." Yu Siyu was lacking a sister who would listen to her show off. She blushed and whispered, "He is the Tanhua Lang of this year's imperial examination. He is from Yangzhou. His father is Minister Tong Fong of the Salt Transport Commissioner. Although he is only a fourth-rank official, his family is rich and richer than many aristocratic families. He was personally appointed as the Zhizhou of Yangzhou by the emperor. He took office a month ago." Yu Miaoqi listened very seriously. She sighed in admiration, "Tanhua Lang. Then he must be overflowing with talent and outstanding appearance. Sister, congratulations on finding such a good man." Since the marriage discussion, this was the first person who was happy for her. Yu Siyu was touched in an instant. She whispered to her, "Sister, you flatter me. Fong Gongzi is indeed talented and handsome. But compared to this year's top scholar, Shen Yuanqi, he is still a bit lacking. The top scholar's appearance can be said to be peerless. He can almost compete with Big Brother." On the day he paraded his horse through the streets, many people were stunned. Flowers, purses, melons, and fruits were scattered all over the streets. Everyone loved beauty. Speaking of the top scholar, there were very few women who didn't praise him when they saw him. Of course, Yu Xiang, who could only accommodate one person in her heart, was an anomaly. Yu Miaoqi was playing with a hollow incense ball. When she heard the name that she had deliberately forgotten for a long time, her hand trembled and she threw the incense ball away. The calculations in her heart were all replaced by shock. The two maidservants standing at the door hurriedly went to pick it up. She secretly took a deep breath. When she opened her mouth again, her voice trembled slightly, "Sister, you said that Shen Yuanqi is really that handsome?" That person was also very handsome. In the past, he had charmed countless young ladies. The iceman who came to the family Shen to propose marriage had even stepped on the threshold. This was the truth and not an exaggeration. Yu Siyu covered her mouth and chuckled, "Of course he is very handsome. I heard that when the emperor saw him, he even used a poem to describe a beauty that could cause the downfall of a city. What an elegant and charming man's appearance, he is unique and outstanding." Everyone present laughed in agreement. Not only did he not feel awkward, he sat steadily and nodded with a smile. This caused the emperor to exclaim in admiration. Immediately, he was bestowed with a navy official's robe and became a scholar of the Imperial Hanlin Academy. He saved 4 years of exile and directly became an official in the capital. The emperor is really blessed. When the anecdote of the top scholar was mentioned, any family's daughter would say a few words. The more she listened, the more she felt that his behavior and bearing resembled that person. Yu Miaoqi felt that her heart was about to jump out of her throat. With trembling hands, she poured a cup of hot tea and continued to ask, "Sister, do you know where he is from? It's a very, very distant place. I vaguely heard someone mention it, but now I have forgotten. If sister is anxious to know, sister will send someone to help you ask around." Yu Xiu giggled. Yu Miaoqi hurriedly shook her head, "No, no, I was just casually asking. Sister should concentrate on embroidering the dowry. You don't need to trouble yourself for me. It's getting late, I'll leave now." When she stepped on the ground, she couldn't help but sway. She felt that her head was heavy and her feet were light. If this Shen Yuanqi was really that Shen Yuanqi, who knew how he would deal with her now that he had a meteoric rise in his career? After all, she had taken Shen Yuanqi's life-saving money. If he revealed a word or half a sentence to others, how could she establish herself in the capital? No, 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 there were many people in the world with the same name and surname. It might not be him. He had already signed a death contract and became a slave. How could he still have the qualifications to participate in the imperial examinations? Impossible. Her mood fluctuated several times. Yu Miaoqi took a deep breath and ran to the Lin clan for help. In the side hall of the main courtyard, the Lin clan waited for Yu Miaoqi to leave before suddenly kneeling in front of the matriarch. She firmly said, "Mother, I want to be in charge of the family." The matriarch's face didn't show any surprise. She half closed her eyes and asked, "After living in seclusion for 14 years, why do you suddenly want to be in charge of the family?" "Back then, I begged you many times." The Lin clan said word by word, 14 years ago, your daughter-in-law had nothing to live for. 14 years later, Qi came back. I have hope to live again. Everyone says that a mother is strong. Without waiting for her to finish speaking, the matriarch gave her a slap. She fell to the ground, her lips stained with blood. A mother is strong. You still have the face to say that a mother is strong in front of me. The matriarch sat up straight. She picked up the walking stick by the bed and used it to hit her. Back then, when Yandere was forced into desperate situations and needed your help, where were you? You want to live when your daughter comes back, but you want to die when your son is by your side. What are you thinking? Could it be that imaginary things are more precious than real people by your side? If you had dared to die with Junjie back then, would have admired you. Now, I'm disgusted by your attitude. You should be glad that you gave birth to a good son. Otherwise, my prefecture you wouldn't have been able to tolerate you. The Lin clan didn't dodge. She allowed her to hit him. Taking advantage of the time when she stopped to rest, she spoke again, "No matter what, your daughter-in-law is awake now. Your daughter-in-law wants to support this family again and let our son and daughter live peacefully and happily without any worries." How could she not want to reconcile with her son now? But it was obvious that her son didn't need her anymore. Her daughter was still so weak and helpless. This made her feel that her life wasn't completely useless. Worry about the future. You're the one who's worrying about the future. The matriarch sneered in her heart. She picked up the prayer beads and twisted them with her eyes closed. She didn't speak for a long time. The Lin clan didn't give up. She kowtowed 3 times and threatened, "If mother doesn't allow it, your daughter-in-law will run to that bastard and reveal her identity. Let's see if she still has the face to stay in my Marquis Yongla." The matriarch suddenly opened her eyes. Her expression was so fierce that she wanted to eat the Lin clan alive. After 4 years of companionship and leaning on each other, she had long regarded Yu Xiang as her own granddaughter. What she was most worried about was that she would distance herself from her and Yen, or after learning about her identity and then make a fuss about wanting to leave. As expected, Yu Miaoqi's return woke the Lin clan up. But they didn't wake up in the right place. They actually dared to threaten their mother-in-law. The matriarch took several deep breaths to suppress the urge to beat the Lin clan to death. Chapter 56. The mother-in-law and daughter-in-law glared at each other without saying a word. The hall instantly fell into a dead silence. Mama Ma had already chased all the servants out of the courtyard and stood by the door to listen. After a long confrontation, the Lin clan was finally defeated. She kowtowed 3 more times and said sincerely, "If mother didn't force me, daughter-in-law wouldn't dare to do this. Mother didn't think about it. Yen, Yu Xiang, Qi, and Siyu are all grown up and will soon have to discuss their marriage. It's not appropriate for Yu Xiang to manage this family. Don't tell me you want an unmarried young lady like her to choose a husband for herself and her siblings. Wouldn't that be a joke? There are many social interactions that need to be done. She's not good at it, so how can it be convenient? Now that it's my turn to manage the family, it's the best. I guarantee that the marriages of the siblings will be handled properly and perfectly. When Lord Husband was still alive, wasn't mother always very satisfied with me? This time, I beg you to give me a chance to turn over a new leaf. I really know my mistakes." After saying that, she kowtowed 3 more times. Her attitude was very humble. The matriarch closed her eyes and didn't say anything. After a full quarter of an hour, she opened her eyes and waved her hand. "Fine, I'll leave the family to you for the time being. However, I have to warn you in advance. You're not allowed to use your power to mistreat Xiang, and you're not allowed to make any mistakes. If I catch you in the wrong, take the divorce letter and go back to your parents' home. My prefecture you won't tolerate you anymore." The Lin clan believed that she definitely wouldn't make a mistake and immediately nodded. Mother's teachings are right. Daughter-in-law will remember them. I just don't know when Yu Xiang will hand over the account books, matching cards, and storehouse keys to me. Seeing that she couldn't wait, the matriarch glanced at her mockingly and said slowly, "I'll have Xiang, send the things to you later. Don't be anxious. Write a military order for me. If you make a mistake, you'll take the divorce letter and leave. Thank you, mother, for your help. Your daughter-in-law will file a complaint now." Seeing that their goal had been achieved, the members of the Lin clan wrote down the military order without hesitation and then lifted their feet to leave. However, before they reached the door, they were stopped by the old lady. "Wait, I have to warn you. Don't secretly go to Xiang'er and reveal her identity. Do you think you can force her to submit to you and Yu Miaoqi? You're wrong. Xiang'er was personally raised by Yandere, so her temperament was exactly the same as Yandere's. They were both masters who would seek revenge for the smallest grievance. If you make her unhappy for a while, she will go all out to make you and Yu Miaoqi unhappy for the rest of your life. If you don't believe me, go ahead and try." Needless to say, the members of the Lin clan really did have the idea of privately finding Yu Xiang to reveal her identity so that she would know who was closer to her. However, once the old lady said this, she didn't know what to do. If what the old lady said was true, then Yu Xiang was like a copper ball covered in spikes. Once touched, it would prick your hand. The only way to deal with her was to use a heavy hammer to flatten her. However, she had the protection of the old lady and Yu Pinyin, 2 great gods. Who would dare to use a heavy hammer on her? Even if they said a few harsh words to her and caused her eyes to turn red, Yu Pinyin would chop them up with a knife. The members of the Lin clan's hearts were filled with fear. They turned to look at Mama Kim. Mama Kim nodded slightly, indicating that the old lady was telling the truth. Yu Xiang really had a fiery temper that couldn't be provoked. If they angered her, she could turn hostile and ruthless in a breath. It wasn't impossible for her to reveal the young Mrs. identity to the entire capital. The members of the Lin clan could only grit their teeth and agree. The Lin clan was clearly going to be in charge of the household, but it was as if they had lost a battle. They walked like they were floating and had no strength. Yu Miaoqi stood in the corridor to welcome her. When she saw this scene, she anxiously asked, "Mother, did grandmother refuse?" "No," old ancestor agreed. The members of the Lin clan led their daughter into the room. After the two of them sat down, they sent all the servants away, leaving only Mama Kim to guard the door. They leaned close to each other and began to talk in private. "Mother, you don't know, but that Yu Xiang was so unreasonable. She actually warned me in front of me not to get close to my brother. What right does she have? That's my brother, not hers." Yu Miaoqi began to cry again when she spoke of this. She continued, "I happened to meet my brother on the road and told him about this. He actually laughed and left. He didn't treat me as family at all. It really made my heart cold." It's fine. You still have mother." The members of the Lin clan were furious, but there was nothing they could do. They could only hug their daughter and pat her. "In the future, mother will be in charge of the household. You won't have to worry about her attitude anymore. Mother will definitely find you a good husband. He'll make you proud and have great wealth. Your brother is now a first-rank great general of agile cavalry. He has millions of soldiers in his hands. Even the princes have to be courteous when they see him, not to mention those nobles. With our family's status, you can even marry a prince's grandson as his official consort. Why bother with a cripple like her? She'll never be able to marry into a noble family in this lifetime. When your brother marries, I'll buy a small residence in the countryside and send her away. Regardless of whether it's a steward, a manservant, or a villager, I'll casually arrange for her. When that time comes, old ancestor and your brother will only be concerned about their new daughter-in-law and the newly born heir. How would they have the time to care about her? Just wait and see. She's glorious now, but she'll definitely have a bad ending in the future." Yu Miaoqi felt much better when she heard this. Her tears turned into laughter. "Mother treats me the best. I didn't expect brother to be a great general of agile cavalry. I only know that he's a commander of everything." She didn't understand the politics of the previous imperial court. Moreover, he was a great general of agile cavalry. His authority was even higher than that of a commander of agile cavalry. For a moment, she was even more determined to have a good relationship with Yu Pinyin. Yu Xiang was afraid that she would snatch Yu Pinyin away, so she was going to try. Because the commander of agile cavalry was an organization established by the emperor in recent years, the Lin clan had never heard of it before. Therefore, she shook her head and said, "I don't know what that commander of agile cavalry does. It's probably a second-rank or third-rank position, so that your brother won't have nothing to do when he's not fighting. Your brother has such a high position and power, and the emperor's favor is generous. That bastard child naturally wants to be close to him. That's a good idea. Son, you also have to get along well with your brother. Let him understand who his true sister is. Although mother can help you a little in the inner residence, your future still needs to rely on your brother. I'll save it." Yu Miaoqi repeatedly nodded. After thinking for a long time, she said, "Mother, can you send someone to investigate this year's top scholar, Shen Yuanqi? Why are you suddenly investigating him? Have you taken a fancy to him? The title of Zhuang Yuan Lang sounds nice, but it's not good enough for my precious daughter." The Lin clan covered their mouths and laughed. Yu Miaoqi's face alternated between red and white. She waved her hand and said, "That's not true. Daughter suspects that he's the legitimate son of the family Shen, which is my original older brother. If it's really him, I'm afraid that he'll reveal daughter's past or try to curry favor with our marquis household. We have to guard against that. Mother, you don't know, but he's now an attendant scholar of the Hanlin Academy. He's staying in the capital. It's already my, Marquis Yongla's, greatest benevolence not to eliminate the family Shen. He actually dares to try to curry favor with us. Speaking of the family Shen, the Lin clan was unable to restrain her anger. She gritted her teeth and said, "Daughter, don't worry. If it's really him, Mother will definitely find a way to get rid of him." "Mother, you mustn't take his life." Yu Miaoqi wished that she could kill everyone in her past, but her face showed that she couldn't bear it. The Lin clan patted the back of her hand with gratification. She smiled and said, You're really kind. The family Shen is so despicable and shameless, but you still care about that little bit of old affection. Forget it, I won't do anything to him. I'll just have your older brother come forward and kick him out of the capital, never to return in this lifetime. A mere attendant scholar of the Hanlin Academy dares to challenge me, Marquis Yongla. He simply doesn't know what's good for him. Yu Miaoqi was still worried. She hesitated and said, "Mother, will brother help me? He seems to dislike me very much." The Lin clan felt a little guilty, but she pretended to be strong. She smiled and comforted her, "I'm his mother. You're his younger sister. This is just a small matter. He wouldn't dare to refuse. It's not that he doesn't like you. He's like this to everyone. But he treats Yu Xiang very differently." Yu Miaoqi's words were full of jealousy. Yu Xiang saved his life once. Naturally, he's different from others. In the future, you two siblings will get along with each other, and your feelings will deepen. In the end, you're blood-related siblings. How could you be afraid that you can't surpass a bastard? My child, you mustn't worry. Everything will be fine. Mother will protect you. The Lin clan hugged her shoulder and patted her gently. "I know. Sure enough, only Mother treats me the best." Yu Miaoqi gradually calmed down in the Lin clan's arms. She asked again, "Mother, I've made some inquiries. Yu Siyu's lover is the Tanhua Lang. His father is the Salt Transport Commissioner, Minister Tong Fong. I heard Mama Ma say that his family has already met with misfortune. Is this true?" The Lin clan had lived in seclusion for many years. They were completely clueless about the happenings in the capital. They didn't know anything, so they could only look at Mama Kim. Mama Kim bowed and replied, "Furin, this should be true. A few days ago, His Majesty conducted a thorough investigation of the salt tax and beheaded many corrupt officials. More than half of the Lianhuai's officialdom was cleared. The Salt Transport Commissioner and Minister Tong Fong is one of the most lucrative positions. That Fong family most likely won't be able to escape His Majesty's butcher's knife." Yu Miaoqi's eyes turned. She asked, "Then why is Yu Siyu still thinking about marrying over?" Grandmother actually agreed. "It's a long story. Eldest Miss definitely doesn't know the inside story." She was muddle-headed for a moment. In order to climb up to a wealthy family, she even threw away her reputation. How could the old lady not teach her a lesson? Mama Kim recounted in detail what she had secretly found out about Fang Jichen being arrested at night. In the end, she sighed, "Don't be fooled by the old lady's words. In reality, she's just trying to scare eldest Mississippi. Just you wait. In a few days, the old lady will lay her cards on the table with eldest Miss and force her to peacefully choose a well-off family to marry over. Official Fong will be beheaded, the Fong family's wealth will be confiscated, and young Master Fong's official position will be used to atone for his crimes and redeem his old mother. How could such a poor family be worthy of marrying a young miss from the Marquis household? Even if it's a concubine's daughter, the old lady definitely won't agree." Yu Miaoqi nodded thoughtfully. The Lin clan chuckled. They lowered their voices and said, "In my opinion, it's best for Yu Siyu to marry into the Fong family. What's wrong with a poor family? A poor family is convenient for us to manipulate. Give them a few hundred taels and tell them to go to the capital to get rid of Yu Siyu. In the future, we won't meet again. If she doesn't behave and still wants to come back, give her another few hundred taels and directly kill her. Hasn't her reputation already been ruined? Let the Fong family publicize this matter. She can either marry or be drowned in a pig cage. The family rules are there. Even the ancestor can't say anything. Mama Kim, send someone to Yangzhou to find the Fong family's mother and son. Be discreet. Mama Kim lowered her head and complied. Yu Miaoqi was greatly satisfied. She hugged the Lin clan's mother and acted like a spoiled child. After the matriarch sent the Lin clan away, she sent someone to inform Yu Xiang of the handover. Yu Xiang didn't say anything and took out 14 years' worth of accounts, matching cards, keys, and other things. There wasn't the slightest bit of resentment. The matriarch was extremely satisfied. In her heart, she thought that Xianger was still the most considerate. She immediately ordered several sturdy women to carry several boxes of account books to the Lin clan. She was prepared to watch with folded arms. The author has something to say. I feel much better after taking the medicine. Although my brain is burned, I unknowingly wrote half a chapter more. Moreover, my writing style is very elegant. Damn, I'm starting to admire myself. Thank you to my rich friends, and thank you to all the friends who supported the original version. I won't kiss you today to avoid infection. Chapter 57. The Lin clan didn't expect Yu Xiang to be so straightforward. Before they could finish their private conversation, 3 large chests had already been placed in the courtyard. There were labels on the chests. 2 of them were the account books of the imperial household, and 1 was the dowry book of the Lin clan over the years. Yu Miaoqi's eyes darkened when she saw the labels. She asked, "Mother, did you entrust your dowry to her as well? Didn't she already know the truth 4 years ago? Why was she still so trusting of Yu Xiang?" The Lin clan felt very awkward when she heard this. She ordered the servants to move the chests into the room and explained, "For the first few years, I was unable to extricate myself from the pain of losing my husband. Therefore, the household affairs, the imperial household, and even the dowry were all handed over to the old ancestor to help manage. Presumably, the old ancestor also handed over the lands and shops that came with the dowry to her. However, I was completely unaware of this." Yu Miaoqi still couldn't let go after hearing this. She complained, "Grandmother already knew about her identity 4 years ago, but still handed over your dowry. It's clear that she trusted and loved her to the extreme. On the other hand, her attitude towards me was neither cold nor warm, neither distant nor close." The Lin clan hurriedly hugged her and comforted her, "My child, don't think too much. Isn't this because you weren't at home in the early years? The old ancestor was lonely and naturally needed someone to accompany her. Thus, she was won over by Yu Xiang. It's the same if you accompany her more in the future. Blood ties are there. There's no reason to be close to an outsider but alienate your family." Yu Miaoqi nodded and directly opened the chests that contained the dowry books. There were many account books neatly arranged inside, and the years were marked on the back pages. The head of the Lin clan took out one of the books and flipped through it. He sneered and said, "Put the account book aside for now. I'll look at it later. I have to check the dowry book carefully. If she did something to my dowry, I'll have to report it to the ancestor so that she can see the true face of this legitimate granddaughter." Yu Miaoqi's mind wandered, and she also took out a book and skimmed through it. She was shocked by the wealth of the Lin clan's maternal family. The dowry of land and shops was a bit too much. It was not an exaggeration to say that it was 10 miles of red dowry. She couldn't help but ask curiously, "Mother, what does our maternal family do? How could he be so rich?" The Lin clan member laughed. "Your maternal family is also a merchant, but they are not lowly traveling merchants. Instead, they are imperial merchants appointed by the imperial family. They are specifically responsible for preparing porcelain, silk, and other items used by the imperial family. Your maternal grandfather is the only red-crowned merchant in the Han dynasty. That year, he once offered 5 million shur of grain to the divine ancestor who was fighting outside to resolve the danger of losing the war. As a result, he was conferred the title of censorate of the Secretariat, and his status is very revered. Yu Miaoqi originally thought that merchants were all lowly people, but after hearing the Lin clan's words, she realized that there were actually godly people who could achieve the pinnacle of being a merchant. And her maternal grandfather was the only outstanding one. The slight discomfort in her heart instantly dissipated, and she said with a smile, "So my maternal grandfather is actually so powerful. Should I take the time to pay him a visit?" The pride on the Lin clan member's face faded, and he sighed. "Your maternal grandfather passed away long ago. Now, your eldest uncle is in charge. Let's talk about visiting another day." The Lin clan was originally the eldest legitimate daughter of the Lin clan, but the current head of the Lin clan was her eldest concubine-born brother who she looked down on the most. Her younger brother was a wastrel. Because he took too much 5 minerals powder, his bones were damaged, and he couldn't have children in this lifetime. As a result, he lost the right to inherit. Because she helped her younger brother fight for power, she had a falling out with her eldest concubine-born brother, and she hadn't returned home for a full 20 years. Her younger brother was now living on his own, and the few remaining family assets had long been squandered away. From time to time, he would find Marquis Yongla to ask for money. Yu Xiang was very generous every time she gave money, and she used all of the Lin clan's dowry. This caused her youngest uncle to nod and bow when he saw her. His attitude was flattering, as if he was treating his own ancestor. However, the Lin clan was completely unaware of these things. Yu Miaoqi saw her gloomy expression and didn't dare to ask more. She thought that she would privately ask Mama Kim for more details, so she smiled and said, "Then let's do it another day. I won't hide it from Mother. When I was in the family Shen, I often helped Shenshur look at the account books. If Mother is too busy, I can help." "Oh. My daughter is actually this capable. Then that's good. Let's immediately carefully examine these account books. If there's a problem, we can bring them to the old ancestor to discuss it." The Lin clan took out all of the account books and began to examine them from the beginning according to the year marked on the spine. Yu Miaoqi picked up the abacus and looked at each line, calculating one line after another. Her speed was very shocking. Because the mother and daughter wanted to find fault, they repeatedly checked each number. When they were halfway through the examination, they really did find quite a few areas with large deficits. The mother and daughter immediately became spirited and continued to examine. The accumulated deficits had reached an inconceivable level. There were even 5 prosperous shops in the capital that had been sold for no reason, and the silver that had been obtained had disappeared. The Lin clan was so angry that their teeth were chattering. They slapped the table and cursed, "What a little bastard child, she actually dared to sell my dowry in private. No wonder she lived so extravagantly. Turns out she dug out my flesh and blood to make up for it. Good, good, good. Mama Kim, take the account books and go to the old ancestor. While you're at it, call Master Ho over as well. In front of them, I want that little bastard child to spit out everything that she ate from me." Mama Kim solemnly agreed. She called over 2 servants to take the account books and leave. Yu Miaoqi slightly lowered her head and used her handkerchief to cover the gloating smile on her face. This Yu Xiang was really bold. She actually swallowed a huge amount of 100,000 taels. Who knew what she spent the money on? If she was forced to spit it out, the scene would really be ugly. When she thought about how this silver was supposed to be her dowry, but it was all swallowed up by that bastard child, her eyes gradually turned cold and her joy immediately disappeared. The Lin clan pulled her up and left. She suddenly came back to her senses and waved her hand. "Wait a moment, I'll put on the embroidered pouch that grandmother gave me." She took out the embroidered pouch from her sewing box and casually folded a piece of paper before putting it inside. Only then did she tie it around her waist and follow the Lin clan to the main courtyard. In the small courtyard of the West Wing, Yu Xiang returned from accompanying the matriarch to recite scriptures. She played with the parrot, Ah Lu, in the corridor for a while. Then she moved the budding peonies from the flower bed into a flower pot. She washed her face and half leaned on the soft couch to rest. Lu looked at the hourglass and realized that it was her master's usual afternoon nap time. She tiptoed over to remove the silk flowers, pearl hairpins, and other things from her hair. Just wear it. I'll sleep for half an hour and won't be able to press it down. Yu Xiang raised her hand to stop her. It's more convenient to remove it. It's more comfortable to lie down and sleep. If you sit like this, your waist will hurt later. In a while, someone will come looking for trouble. How can I fight them when I'm sleepy? It's better to sit for a while and rest. As if she thought of something interesting, Yu Xiang covered her mouth and chuckled. Before Lu could speak, Tao Hong cried out in surprise, looking for trouble. Who in the Marquis household would dare to look for trouble with Miss? Are they tired of living? Yu Xiang pointed in the direction of the main room, her face full of contempt. Lu was even more puzzled and asked, why? Didn't we already hand over the power of the household? We don't have anything left here. Yu Xiang simply stopped sleeping. She ordered Tao Hong to bring her a plate of melon seeds. While eating, she said, she's such a selfish person. She's definitely more concerned about her own dowry book than the household. Coincidentally, there's a problem with her dowry book. The deficit is very large, and she hates me to the bone. She won't wait until she's finished reading all the books before she makes a fuss about it in order to slap me in the face. Deficit? Miss, you embezzled her dowry. Lu was so scared that her face turned pale. She stammered, how much did you embezzle? The gold, silver, and treasures that Master Ho usually gives you aren't enough for you to spend. Why did you have to be so stubborn as to steal her dowry? If this matter really gets out of hand, you won't have anywhere to hide your face. Not only was Yu Xiang not frightened, but she was also overjoyed. She threw the peeled melon seed shells at Lu's head and joked, the emperor isn't worried, but the eunuch is. Look at Tao Hong, he's so calm. Am I that greedy in your eyes? The good things that brother usually gives me are much more valuable than her dowry. That's because she's stupid and doesn't know the seriousness of the matter. Lu bitterly patted the melon seed shells off her head. She thought, when Miss is valiant, no one can stop her. When she's unreliable, she's also really unreliable. It's hard to say whether other people would embezzle their mother's dowry, but when it comes to her, she really would do it. It's not because she's greedy, but purely to cause trouble for the Lin clan. Who knew that even if she didn't embezzle it, those things were still left for her? Oh, maybe not anymore. The darling of the Lin clan is back, so Master shouldn't have a share of the dowry. Could it be that Master knew that this day would come, so she took the risk? Lu fell into all kinds of imagination. Tao Hong glared at her and scolded, you're the stupid one. Can't you see that Miss is so calm? This definitely doesn't have anything to do with Mississippi. Yu Xiang patted Tao Hong's arm and praised with a smile, my little Tao Hong is finally smart for once. I'm not afraid that she'll make a fuss. On the contrary, I'm afraid that she won't make a big enough fuss. In any case, the person who will lose face in the end won't be me. Before Miss took over, the old lady was in charge of the household. If it wasn't Miss's problem, then wouldn't it be the old lady's problem? Hiss, it can't be, right? Lu suddenly felt alarmed and frightened. She lowered her voice to the lowest possible level, Miss, if the old lady has a problem, then this matter will become even more complicated. It'll be a shocking scandal. You have to quickly inform the old lady and suppress this matter. Seriously, why didn't you fill in the accounts first before sending them over? Yu Xiang laughed even more happily and waved her hands repeatedly. How do you know that I didn't fill in the accounts? I've already filled in the accounts long ago. It's just that she was blinded by lard and didn't recognize it. Since old ancestor dared to do this kind of deficit, she naturally wasn't afraid of others finding out. If the Lin clan slightly remembered our mother-daughter relationship and privately came to ask me about it, or if they patiently read through all the accounts, then this matter wouldn't have blown up. But if she deliberately wanted to find fault with me and make me lose face, then she would definitely anxiously complain to old ancestor. Old ancestor was testing her, or perhaps she wanted to ruthlessly punish her. In any case, no matter what old ancestor wanted to do, the Lin clan wouldn't be able to get away with it. Just wait and see. Let's see who loses face in the end. In any case, it won't be this pretty face of mine. She touched her own cheeks and lightly hummed a song. As soon as Lulu saw her wilted appearance, she knew that the Lin clan was going to be slapped in the face again. She couldn't help but sigh inwardly. They were clearly biological mother and daughter, so why did they make it seem like there was a deep hatred between them that spanned several lifetimes? Just because Miss was born to jinx Master Ho to death. This reason was too absurd. In 14 years, I've never seen Miss jinx anyone. Also, where did that second Miss pop out from? She looked just like the Lin clan, with a face full of bad luck. With that mother and daughter together, the Fu probably wouldn't have any peace in the future. The author has something to say. Thank you to my rich friends, and thank you to all the friends who supported the original novel. Mwax. I haven't forgotten about you today. I'm so gratified. Chapter 58. It wasn't easy for the Lin clan to get hold of Yu Xiang's weakness. Even if they offered to send her to the countryside to make the purchase, grandmother dowager and Yu Pinyin wouldn't be able to say anything. How could a daughter be so impatient to embezzle her mother's dowry? In other words, if she could embezzle even her mother's dowry, what else could stop her greed? Such inferior behavior was enough to suppress Yu Xiang until she couldn't raise her head. Even if grandmother dowager and Yu Pinyin insisted on protecting her, she wouldn't be able to run rampant in the future. The more the Lin clan thought about it, the more pleased they became. Their footsteps quickened, and in the blink of an eye, they arrived at the entrance of the main courtyard. Yu Miaoqi followed closely behind. Mama Ma, who was standing in the corridor, saw the two of them and quickly entered the room. She whispered, "The old lady, they really came." Humph! Grandmother dowager gently twirled her prayer beads and slowly said, "They only waited for 2 hours before coming here. They're too impatient. I'm afraid they didn't even look at the account books after that." Mama Ma lowered her head and didn't dare to answer. She knew that there would be a commotion in the room soon, so she gave Wanqiu a look, hinting for her to get rid of all the irrelevant people. Make a fuss, make a fuss. How much trouble has she caused in just 2 days? Let me count. Grandmother dowager put down her prayer beads and calculated with her fingers. Her smile grew colder. She's indeed a jinx. Since she came back, there has been no peace in the family. I thought she would be able to persuade the Lin clan to stop, but I didn't expect her to be even more restless. All she wants is to fight for the family's favor and the family business. Does the Lin clan not favor her enough? She dares to set her sights on the family business. What does she think of my Yandere? If I knew this would happen, I wouldn't have brought her back in the first place. Grandmother dowager shook her head and sighed. Mama Ma comforted her softly, "You're not that cold-hearted. How could you watch your granddaughter wander outside and not bring her back? It's also because she's young and frivolous. If you wake her up and slowly train her in the future, you'll be able to cut her into a new shape in a year or 2. Train her? With her inferior character, it would be useless even if I trained her for a few hundred years." This was a sign that her roots weren't good. She had inherited the teachings of the Lin clan. In the end, it's all my fault. It's all my fault for not being able to see through people back then. I welcomed such an unreliable person into the family and even gave birth to a little jinx. That's why there's no peace in the family now. The more the matriarch spoke, the angrier she became. She was just waiting for the Lin clan to come in and deal with her. If she had thought of this earlier, she would have finished looking through the central household's accounts before bringing them over. The more Yumiauchi thought about it, the more mistakes she made. Her rosy face gradually began to pale. She couldn't help but pinch the pouch at her waist. The sound of something tearing caused the old lady to open her eyes. She raised her eyebrows and said, "You're finally wearing this protective talisman. Since grandmother gave it to me, I naturally have to carry it with me. Previously, I was obsessed with it and was actually a little reluctant to part with it. Who knew that grandmother wouldn't ask for a new one if it was worn out? Grandmother's love and care for you is something that your granddaughter doesn't dare to forget." These words were so sweet that they could practically drip honey. However, the old lady's face did not have the slightest trace of happiness. She only used a gloomy, oppressive, and hair-raising gaze to stare at her. Yumiauchi lowered her head as if she had been electrocuted. Her heart suddenly thundered like a drum. She vaguely realized that she had said something wrong, but she couldn't figure out what she had said. Could it be that the old lady already knew that I burned the protective talisman, so she tested me several times? As soon as this thought appeared, it caused her breathing to stop. If that was the case, it would be extremely difficult to win over the old lady in the future. In the old lady's mind, she was probably already a two-faced, hypocritical, and pretentious character. Wrong, wrong, wrong. Why was every step wrong? Could it be that this step was wrong again? After thinking about it several times in her mind, Yumiauchi felt like she was sitting on a board of nails. She wanted nothing more than to fly away. Just at this moment, two servant girls pushed Yu Xiang into the room. She nodded at them one by one in greeting. The Lin clan coldly snorted. Their gazes were as sharp as knives as they pierced her. The old lady lightly patted the soft couch next to her and called, "Xianger, come sit with the old ancestor." The two servant girls carried her to the soft couch and tidied up her skirt. Yu Xiang leaned against the Kong table. She turned the screen of the small Kong bed with one hand and propped up her chin with the other. She lazily asked, "Old ancestor, did something big happen at home? I was just about to take an afternoon nap. I can't even open my eyes right now." She blinked her clear cat eyes. A few strands of moisture stuck to her thick eyelashes. She looked both innocent and cute. The old lady rubbed her head and said, "Wait for your older brother and sister to come first. Your mother has something important to announce." The old lady's tone seemed calm, but it actually hid a sinister chill. The Lin clan and Yumiauchi shifted uneasily. Yu Xiang nodded. She moved a plate of peanuts from the Kong table closer to her and began to peel them. She didn't eat them. She only pouted her red lips and blew off the inner layer of red clothing, leaving the round peanuts behind. For a moment, the only sound that could be heard in the silent hall was the cracking of peanut shells. There was also the sound of the red clothing curling up and falling to the ground. It was like a light snowfall. The cold and solemn atmosphere quietly dissipated amidst the cracking sounds. The old lady looked at her granddaughter, who was immersed in her work without a care in the world. Her stern face softened slightly. She then saw her granddaughter shove the handful of peanuts that she had painstakingly peeled into her hands and urged her to eat quickly. The old lady immediately smiled and lovingly pinched her cheeks. Although Yumiauchi was her blood-related granddaughter, she still couldn't compare to the granddaughter that she had raised herself. There was still a gap between them emotionally. At this moment, Yumiauchi finally realized that it was impossible for her to win the old lady's favor over Yu Xiang. Originally, she still had a chance when she first came back. However, she burned the old lady's protective talisman and also burned the gentle image that she had painstakingly built. She could only blame herself for not understanding the situation in the Marquis household. The Lin clan wasn't the mistress of the household. Instead, their status was awkward and neither high nor low. Other than Mama Kim, everyone else in her small courtyard had probably become the old lady and Yuxiang's informants. It was just the death of her husband, but she made it seem like the sky had collapsed. She was truly useless. The more Yu Miaoqi thought about it, the more she hated the Lin clan. Mama Kim had been ordered to invite Master Ho. At this moment, she was trembling in fear at the door of the study. Just as she was about to open her mouth, she was frozen by Master Ho's cold and indifferent gaze. She hurriedly lowered her head. From the corner of her eye, she caught a glimpse of the room full of portraits. Her heart trembled fiercely. She was very familiar with the people in the painting. They were all Yuxiang's extremely beautiful face, from the age of 10 to 14. Some of them were crying, some of them were laughing, some of them were happy, some of them were sad, some of them were sitting, and some of them were lying down. All kinds of expressions and postures were so vivid and lifelike. Moreover, there was a strong sense of nostalgia flowing out from every stroke of the painting. Even people who didn't know how to appreciate paintings couldn't ignore it. Mama Kim thought about how her master intended to deal with Yuxiang today. She had even asked Master Ho to be the judge. She was afraid that her master wouldn't be able to do as she wished. Not only would she not be able to do as she wished, but there would also be a rift between her and Master Ho. Mother and son weren't close to begin with. In the future, it would develop to the point where they would be at each other's throats. Thinking of this, she became more and more regretful. However, she had no choice but to obey her master's orders. She could only grit her teeth and continue to wait. Yu Pinyin stood behind the desk with an unfinished portrait spread out in front of him. A pair of beautiful eyes revealed a profound light under his repeated strokes. Only a little bit of cherry lips remained uncolored. He diluted the cinnabar, dipped it in a brush, and tested the color on the paper next to him. He felt that it was still too rich, so he diluted it a little more. He tested the color again and again before he dared to lightly dye the appropriate amount of cinnabar on the cherry lips. He had used his finger to stroke the small lips countless times in reality. In the portrait, he was also unable to move his eyes away. He stared fixedly for a long time until the ink at the tip of the brush was about to dry. Only then did he look at Mama Kim and ask, "What is it?" Mama Kim trembled and said in a low voice, replying to Master Ho, "Madam asked you to go to the main courtyard. She said that she has something important to discuss with you." "I'm not going." Yu Pinyin's refusal was very straightforward. As he spoke, he dipped the brush into the brush washer and stirred it. Mama Kim took a deep breath and continued, replying to Master Ho, "This matter concerns Miss 3. Please be sure to." Before she could finish speaking, the handsome youth threw down the brush and walked away with his hands clasped behind his back. As he passed by her, he glanced indifferently at her. Those deep eyes, which seemed to have been tempered for countless light years, didn't have a trace of human life. There was only the coldness of a storm. Chapter 59. After Yu Pinyin entered the room, he didn't look at the Lin clan and Yu Miaoqi. After greeting the matriarch, he bent down to pick up Yuxiang and put her on his lap. Yuxiang turned around to feed him a peanut, then continued to peel the shell. "Don't eat it. If it's not peanuts, it's melon seeds. Be careful not to get heaty." Yu Pinyin snatched the plate of peanuts and had Mama Ma take it out. He ordered, "Pour a cup of curing tea for Mississippi." Mama Ma agreed in a low voice, but then she heard Yuxiang call out, "Curing tea is too bitter. Add 2 spoonfuls of sugar." Seeing her brother squint at her, Momo stammered, "No, no, no, add 1 spoonful. 1 spoonful is enough." Her brother's gaze was still full of disapproval. She struggled, half a spoonful, no less. As she spoke, she poked her brother's hard chest with her white fingertips. Yu Pinyin finally couldn't hold it in anymore. His cold eyes instantly melted into a pool of soft water. He helplessly said, "Add half a spoonful of sugar." He gently rubbed his sister's lips with his thumb. No wonder it was so sweet and delicious. He didn't know when she would be able to eat it. They really were a pair of quarrelsome lovers. It was fate that had been cultivated over 100 years. The matriarch shook her head and laughed. Her mood immediately improved. In the hall, the Lin clan mother and daughter had their heads lowered. No one knew what they were thinking. After a short while, Wuxia came in late, followed by Mama Ma, who was carrying tea. "Greetings, old ancestor." "Greetings, mother. What did you call me here for today?" Wuxia's face was full of anticipation. She secretly guessed that they wanted to talk about her marriage. "Sit down. Your mother has something to say. Let's all listen." The matriarch waved her hand and then looked at the Lin clan. The Lin clan downed a cup of tea, then opened the chest and took out the account books. She slammed them on the table and said in an agitated tone, "Mother, take a good look at these account books. My dowry was actually more than 100,000 taels of silver, and 5 prosperous shops were also sold at a discount. If I hadn't recovered them in time, I'm afraid that in a few years, there would only be an empty shell left. I just want to know who's in charge of this house. How dare you play such dirty tricks?" As he spoke, he glared fiercely at Wuxia. At this time, Wuxia was nestled in her brother's arms, sipping the tea that her brother fed her, as if she didn't hear her accusation. On the other hand, old Madame burst into laughter. Her voice was filled with suppressed anger. "Lin clan, take a look at the back pages. The account books with problems are all from 21 years ago, when I was still in charge of the household. This is admitting to embezzling the dowry. Or did the old lady admit it herself?" The Lin clan was dumbfounded. Of course, she clearly saw the year marked on the back pages, but she didn't even think about old Madame. Old Madame's maternal family was the most famous Confucian family in the Great Han Dynasty. Since the founding of the Great Han Dynasty, there had never been a person with bad morals. The strictness of her family's upbringing was evident. Old Madame herself was the model of a virtuous lady. She couldn't tolerate sand in her eyes. How could she do such a disgraceful thing? The Lin clan firmly believed that Wuxia had falsified the account books and shifted the deficit to old Madame, so that they would mistakenly believe it was old Madame who did it and suffer this grievance. She insisted on making a fuss because she wanted old Madame to see Wuxia's true colors. However, she never expected old Madame to admit it without a trace of hesitation. Why did she embezzle her dowry? Where could she spend it? It was simply inconceivable. "Mother, even if you want to spoil your child, you shouldn't spoil her like this. You actually helped her take on such a big matter." The Lin clan cried out in exasperation. "Shut up." Old Madame raised her teacup and fiercely slammed it on the ground. The loud bang seemed to directly hit their hearts, and it shocked everyone into silence. Wuxia buried her face in her brother's arms and tightly wrapped her arms around his thin and strong waist. Yu Pinyin thought she was afraid and quickly patted her back. He lowered his head and was about to say a few comforting words when he saw her secretly winking at him. Her small appearance revealed a wilted and mischievous look. Yu Pinyin almost couldn't hold back his low laughter. He lovingly and pitifully pinched the tip of her nose and mouthed silently, "Naughty." Yu Miaoqi hid behind the Lin clan, feeling more and more nervous. When Wuxia saw that the Lin clan wanted to make trouble for Wuxia, she was originally rejoicing in their misfortune. Who knew that the situation would suddenly take a turn for the worse? Old Madame actually personally admitted that she embezzled the Lin clan's dowry. This shocking secret scared her half to death, and she couldn't help but feel distressed. Old Madam saw that the Lin clan's faces were deathly pale and couldn't say anything, so she continued, "Do you know why I embezzled your dowry?" In the 10th year of Chenkang, Yandere entered the palace to participate in the crown prince's study companion and needed a large amount of money to bribe him. In the 14th year of Chenkang, the 2nd, 3rd, 4th, and 5th branches came to our door to cause trouble. Yandere and I were really weak, so we spent a large amount of money to bribe the clan elders. In the 16th year of Chenkang, the 3rd branch set up a vicious scheme to frame Yandere for murder and bribed him with another sum of money. From the 17th to the 19th year of Chenkang, Yandere was poisoned 3 times and his life was in danger. Just the medical fees alone took away more than half of the family's wealth. After Junjia's death, the 1st branch was already in a precarious situation, and there were a bunch of jackals, wolves, tigers, and leopards waiting to take over the Marquis household. Under these circumstances, even the 120 sets of dowry I brought had already been used up, but you only touched a layer of skin. That year, I personally asked you if I could borrow some of your dowry, and you even nodded and agreed. What, now you're going back on your word? That's right. When Yandere was on the verge of death several times, you burned yellow joss paper in your room. When Yandere went to the battlefield, you were embroidering portraits. When Yandere became a commander-in-chief, when he was tortured to kill people and lost his good fortune, all you wanted to do was to bring your daughter back. When Yandere needed you, what were you doing? Do you still think of him as your son? Now that your life is better, you come here to denounce him. You don't even know whether you're worthy or not, and whether you have the face to open your mouth. Right now, when I see you, I feel disgusted. If Junjia knew in the underworld, he would definitely ask a ghost messenger to send you a letter of divorce. Do you believe it or not? Do you dare to kneel in front of Junjia's memorial tablet and ask him personally what he thinks? The more Lin clan member listened, the paler her face became. By the time she reached the last few sentences, she was on the verge of collapsing. She said incoherently, "Mother, I was wrong. I don't remember anything. No, if I knew earlier. It's not like that, I thought." Her mind was in a mess. She realized that everything she said was inappropriate and wrong. Furthermore, her son was looking at her with an extremely cold gaze. She almost collapsed on the spot. It wasn't that she didn't care about her son, it was just that she woke up too late. There was already no turning back. Yu Miaoqi wished that she could turn into a wisp of smoke and disappear. She originally thought that she could live a good life by relying on the Lin clan in the future. Who knew that the Lin clan was so unreliable that it was far beyond her imagination? It was to the point that they were loathed by everyone. Now that they were tied together with the Lin clan, it was no wonder that they couldn't gain any advantage in front of old Madam and Yu Pinyin. Yu Siyu's expression was wooden. She didn't feel much about these things. Yu Xiang was already furious. She slightly withdrew from her brother's embrace. She looked at the Lin clan and sneered, "Mother, what did you think? Did you think that I embezzled all these things and framed the old ancestor? Why didn't you read all the account books before coming to make trouble for me? The old ancestor's dowry couldn't be redeemed. These years, the little surplus in the fu was used to redeem your dowry. Look carefully at this account book for the 23rd year of Chenkang. The 5 prosperous shops and the 100,000 taels of silver have all been returned. You came here to make trouble for the old ancestor. It's really disdainful." She pulled out the account book with the words 23rd year of Chenkang on the back and fiercely smashed it on the Lin clan's head. The Lin clan cried out in pain. Suppressing her shock, she replied, "Let's not talk about this first. Why do you take 200 taels of silver from my shop in the west of the city every month? After 4 years, it should be close to 10,000 taels of silver, right?" Yu Xiang shook her head and said word by word, "Mother, go ask youngest uncle where the 200 taels of silver went. Youngest uncle's family is having a hard time, so they come to the Fu every month to ask for money. I have 20 taels of silver every month. I can't afford it, and I'm in charge of the central treasury. I can't embezzle, so I can only take 200 taels of silver from your dowry. If mother feels that it's wrong, you can go ask youngest uncle for it yourself. The Lin clan was dumbfounded. Yu Miaoqi lowered her head even more, and the shock in her heart grew even more. She never expected that not only was the Lin clan unreliable, her maternal uncle's family was even more unreliable. Every month, they came to her niece's house to ask for money. How shameless were they? Didn't they just say that their wealth was comparable to that of a country? Yu Xian continued to ridicule. Mother didn't even finish reading the account book before pushing all the blame onto me. She immediately went to the old ancestor to reason with me. This is clearly trying to trample on my dignity. If one or two unpleasant words were to spread, I wouldn't be able to establish myself in the capital anymore. I find it strange. Older brother and I are clearly your biological children. Why do you only care about second sister and treat us like we don't exist? Who exactly was the one who accompanied you for 14 years? If you cared about your mother-daughter relationship and came to ask me in private, or patiently read the account book, how could today's farce have occurred? Mother's actions are truly chilling. She pretended to be sad as she wiped the corners of her eyes and burrowed into her older brother's embrace to seek comfort. Didn't the Lin clan refuse to acknowledge her? She just had to use their mother-daughter relationship to disgust the Lin clan. Yu Pinyin tightly hugged his younger sister, and his lips quickly slid across her forehead. When he looked at the Lin clan again, the trace of warmth in his eyes completely turned into a murderous aura. He said word by word, I originally thought that we were a family, and that we should help each other in times of crisis. But it turns out that mother didn't think that way. Since that's the case, let's open up all the account books and settle them clearly today, so that we won't be confused in the future. What did he mean by your and mine? Was he planning to draw a clear line between them? The Lin clan didn't have enough time to regret. They could only clutch at their sleeves and feel so sad that they couldn't speak. Yu Miaoqi suddenly knelt in front of the hall and kowtowed as she said, Grandmother, please forgive mother this time. Mother only did this because she was muddle-headed. In the future, brother will also have a share of mother's dowry. It's worth it to spend more for brother. You're right. Yu Xian lowered her head to look at her, her eyes full of calculation and ridicule. Brother also has a share of mother's dowry. But look at how mother is behaving. She doesn't care about brother at all, and only treats you as the apple of her eye. You've just returned, and you're already causing such a ruckus. In a few years, won't you have all of mother's dowry in your hands? That won't do. Yu Miaoqi didn't expect her to speak so bluntly. Halfway through kowtowing, she froze and simply couldn't find the words to refute. The matriarch's eyebrows twitched, and she immediately said, Xiang'er is right. In a few years, the Lin clan won't be able to see Yandere anymore. Lin clan, if you really know your wrongs, then divide the dowry among the children in front of me. You can't favor only one. Didn't you say that I pocketed your dowry? Fine, then I'll openly swallow it today. It's better than feeding it all to this ingrate Yu Miaoqi. Yu Siyu, who was sitting on the stool and pretending to be a wooden puppet, instantly became spirited. The Lin clan looked at the stern-looking matriarch, then looked at their cold-looking son. They only felt that their hearts, livers, spleens, lungs, and kidneys were being crushed. The pain was unbearable. She wasn't willing to split it. If she didn't split it, she was afraid that today wouldn't be kind. Who told her to be so wrong this time? Yu Miaoqi didn't show it on her face, but in reality, her heart was burning. She felt like she was about to vomit blood. The author has something to say. My fever has gone down, but my muscles have been sore for the past 2 days, and I want to sleep all the time. Then today, I dreamt that I fell into the latrine pit, and fell twice. Then I climbed out and kept wiping myself with paper towels. The Lord of Zhou interpreted my dream and said that I'm going to make a fortune, ha ha ha. Thank you to my rich friends, and thank you to all the friends who supported the original version. Moi. Chapter 60. Yu Pinyin didn't say anything. He only played with his sister's white and tender hand while glancing indifferently at the Lin clan. He saw that she lowered her head and didn't say anything for a long time. He was afraid that she was very unwilling. His originally cold heart had already lost all feeling. How could he be interested in such a small dowry? He only wanted to measure his worth in the Lin clan's heart. The Lin clan didn't disappoint him. They chose to abandon him every time. Mama Kim stood at the door. When she saw the frost gradually gathering in Master Ho's eyes, she was as anxious as an ant on a hot pan. She wanted nothing more than to run over and press the Lin clan down to agree. What was a small dowry? Could it be more important than Master Ho's heart? With Master Ho's protection, what couldn't they want in the future? Madam really didn't know how to think. The Lin clan wasn't reluctant to give Yu Pinyin, but they were reluctant to give Yu Siyu and Yu Xiang. They couldn't help but look at the matriarch with pleading eyes. Before the matriarch could speak, Yu Pinyin chuckled softly, "Old ancestor, there's no need. I don't dare to take her things. Otherwise, I'll be blamed in the future." Yu Xiang immediately objected, "How can that be? Older brother deserves it. How can I let Yu Miaoqi take advantage of it?" Yu Pinyin pinched her cheek and smiled, "All right, Xianger, there's no need to bicker with them. What do you want that older brother can't get for you? The pearls and corals of the Eastern Sea, the gems and spices of the Western regions, older brother can give it to you with both hands. It's better for her to keep those things for herself. It'll be easier for her to live in the future, right?" Such arrogant words might have been laughed at by others, but they were very convincing when they came from Yu Pinyin's mouth. He was the most powerful person in the Great Han Kingdom aside from the Emperor and Crown Prince. Obtaining a promise from him was more valuable than any treasure. Yu Miaoqi and Yu Siyu were so jealous that their eyes turned red. Yu Xiang curled her lips and complained, "That's not the same. That was originally yours. I just feel sorry for you. You're obviously my biological daughter, so why are you treating her so differently? If it had not been for you, the Marquis household would have fallen, and her dowry would have been plundered. She enjoys the good life you give her. What right does she have to stand here and shout at you? We didn't misappropriate her dowry on purpose. She is also a member of the Marquis household. Shouldn't she do something for the Marquis household?" The members of the Lin clan were so embarrassed that they couldn't raise their heads, but they couldn't refute her. Just as they were feeling conflicted, they saw their son standing up with Yu Xiang in his arms. His smile was like a spring breeze, and his tone was extremely gentle. "Good Xianger, I know you love your brother dearly." Her brother was an 8-foot-tall man. How could he covet her little things? It's good that he didn't take them. It'll save us the trouble in the future. He glanced meaningfully at Yu Miaoqi. Yu Xiang immediately stopped talking. She leaned on his shoulder and waved goodbye to the matriarch. Knowing that the siblings were impatient, the matriarch didn't urge them to stay. She sent them out, then turned to look at the stupefied members of the Lin clan. "Since Yandere and Xianger aren't willing to take your things, you should share some with Siyu. When your children get married, whether it's the betrothal gift or dowry, it's your duty as the matriarch of the household to prepare everything. Don't you think so? Do you only want to hold power and not fulfill your duties? Then you should return the spoils to Xianger as soon as possible. You can't even compare to a child who hasn't reached marriageable age. All the salt and rice you've eaten all these years has gone into a dog's stomach." The Lin clan was so embarrassed that she wanted to die. She didn't dare to raise her head, but she still bit her lip and refused to let go. Yu Siyu's mother had destroyed her dreamlike beautiful married life. It was already merciful that she didn't throw Wuxia to the countryside to fend for herself. How could she give her a dowry? Yu Miaoqi understood the situation. She struggled to get up from the ground and gently tugged at the Lin clan's sleeve. The matriarch didn't care whether the Lin clan was willing or not. Since she dared to cause trouble at the door today, she had to dig out a few pieces of her flesh before she could let her go. She opened the account book and pointed with her fingertips. West of the city, Wuli Tile, Yuqing Street, Ning Wang Street, and the 4 shops in Flower Bird Lane are all given to Siyu. In addition, there are 3 fields in Shanghe Village, Xiahe Village, Yangjiaping Village, and 200 hectares of fertile land. All of them are Siyu's dowry. In another year or so, Siyu will be leaving the house. The Lin clan was furious. Even if she hadn't been at home for a long time, she still remembered that these shops and fields were the most profitable. The other shops and fields added together couldn't compare to these few. If she really gave them to Siyu, it would be equivalent to digging out a piece of her flesh. Her blood wouldn't stop flowing. She was about to refute when Siyu quickly got up and bowed. She smiled and said, "Thank you, old ancestor." "Thank you, mother." Siyu wouldn't dare to forget such a deep love. This was really a case of the fisherman benefiting from the fight between the snipe and the clam. She was about to go to heaven. It was rare for the matriarch to find her pleasing to the eye. She waved her hand and said, "All right, you can go back. When you get married, I will ask your mother to take out the title deed." Siyu repeatedly agreed. She didn't even look at the Lin clan and hurriedly left, afraid that something would happen if she was too slow. Yu Miaoqi had just sat down when she knelt down again. She sincerely asked for forgiveness on behalf of her mother. She didn't expect that Yu Xiang would dig such a big hole to lure her into jumping in. No wonder she didn't fix Chen Kang's deficit from 21 years ago. Instead, she casually left it there for others to investigate. It was also because she and the Lin clan were too anxious to deal with her. Otherwise, things wouldn't have ended up like this. It turned out that before she returned home, the Marquis household was in such a precarious situation, while the Lin clan was like an invisible person. They didn't care at all and didn't ask about it. Her personality was truly cowardly to the extreme. Even Chen Shi was 100 times stronger than her. Yu Miaoqi kowtowed as she reflected on herself. She felt that she still had many things to understand. She couldn't act rashly like she did today. The Lin clan saw her kowtow loudly, and their hearts ached. They quickly pulled her up and knelt down themselves. What the matriarch hated the most was the way the two of them displayed their deep affection for their daughter. "If you still had motherly love for your child, what have you been doing these past 14 years? When Yandere was poisoned to death, you only nodded and said, 'I understand.' Who are you acting for right now?" Not only did the matriarch's expression not soften, it became even more gloomy. She sneered, "Stop kowtowing. I can't accept your great courtesy. Yandere wasn't willing to accept your things, which means he wasn't willing to acknowledge you. Are you happy now? In the future, you'll just guard your dowry and Yu Miaoqi. You'll only have a pile of dead things and her left. Oh, that's not right. You still have Junjia's memorial tablet, but you threw Yandere to the side for 14 years. Do you dare to kneel in front of Junjia's grave and personally ask him what he thought of you? Assisting your husband, teaching your children, working hard to run the household, what have you done? Just wait until Junjia comes to settle this debt with you in the Yellow Springs." The Lin clan repeatedly kowtowed and admitted their wrongs. When they heard these words, their bodies couldn't help but stiffen. Their hearts felt like they were being twisted by a knife. Yu Miaoqi felt both embarrassed and resentful. There was another hidden meaning in the matriarch's words, which was to completely separate her and the Lin clan from Yu Pinyin. She would live with the Lin clan and have nothing to do with Yu Pinyin in the future. How could this be? Didn't her status in her husband's family still depend on Yupinyan? Without her maternal family's support, how could she establish herself in her husband's family? Yu Miaoqi was about to open her mouth to defend herself when Mama Ma and a few other old women carried 2 red wooden boxes in. The matriarch gave them a look, and they threw the boxes in front of them with a bang. Then, they silently retreated. In case there are any more problems with the account book and you have no one to argue with, just look at it in my room. You're not allowed to go back until you've finished reading it. Wan Qiu, bring a barrel of lamp oil over in case we need it. Wan Qiu acknowledged and quietly left the room. The matriarch knocked on the box with her cane and said sternly, "Look at it now. If there are any problems, I'll take responsibility." The Lin clan's expression was sluggish. They hadn't yet recovered from their mother-in-law's knife-like sharp words. All they could think about was their late husband's opinion of them. Yu Miaoqi calmed down. She opened the box and took out the account book, stacking it next to the Lin clan's feet. The matriarch gave her a deep look and walked out with her cane. Yu Miaoqi only collapsed on the ground and the heavy and slow footsteps faded away. She panted a few times and quickly got up. She moved the abacus closer and flipped through it while converting. When she saw the account book from Chen Kang's 21st year, her eyes widened. She originally thought that she was very smart and capable since she followed Father Shen everywhere when she was 7 or 8 years old. However, Yu Xiang's ability was far above hers. Not to mention other things, just this improved account book was very extraordinary. Every item was made into a table, and she listed all the details that other people could think of or not. She listed them all in the table, and one only needed to glance at it to understand it clearly. These account books were simply clean to the extreme. Because of her good management, the Marquis Yongla, which was originally unable to make ends meet, gradually walked out of the haze and had a surplus year after year. No wonder the matriarch praised her so much. No wonder Yu Pinyin doted on her so much. It wasn't without reason. When she admitted this, Yu Miaoqi's heart, which had already been corroded by jealousy, felt like it was soaked in magma. It burned fiercely, and a thought of never admitting defeat took root in her mind. Take charge of the family. She also wanted to take charge of the family. She wanted to let the matriarch and Yu Pinyin see who was better. Who was the true legitimate daughter of the Marquis Yongla? Yu Pinyin held his little sister as they walked in the warm and brilliant spring sunshine. His little sister reached out to touch the flowers. He picked one and stuck it in her hair with a very focused gaze. Yu Xiang also picked one and stuck it in her brother's hair. She even tightened her grip around her brother's neck and refused to let him take it down. Seeing that he had no choice but to compromise, she pursed her lips and smiled evilly. The two of them looked at each other with their foreheads pressed against each other. They could see the complete joy in each other's eyes. "Brother, do you really like it? Don't you feel sad that the Lin clan treated you like that?" After hesitating for a long time, Yu Xiang slowly opened her mouth. "I don't feel anything." Yu Pinyin's tone was indifferent. He then asked, "What about you? Are you sad?" "I don't feel anything either. The only person in this world who can make me sad is brother. If one day brother doesn't want me anymore, I'll die of sadness." When she said the word die, she deliberately emphasized it. This wasn't an exaggerated figure of speech. It was death in the truest sense. She was originally a soul from another world. Her roots were not in the soil of the Han dynasty, but in Yu Pinyin's soul. If Yu Pinyin abandoned her, she would naturally wither away slowly. Yu Pinyin's eyes darkened. He said hoarsely, "How can that be? Even if I don't want my own life, I won't abandon Xiang'er. I've said it before, Xiang'er is my lifeblood." Yu Xiang whispered into his ear, "Brother, you're also my lifeblood. You're the person I like the most in this world." After saying this, she quickly kissed him lightly on the cheek. Then she pursed her lips and smiled. Yu Pinyan's heart was greatly shaken, but his expression was very calm. He ordered in a low voice, "Kiss me again. Otherwise, brother will throw you away." Yu Xiang smiled brightly as she leaned in for another kiss. However, she didn't expect him to suddenly turn his head. The kiss that was supposed to land on his cheek slid past the corner of his lips. Yu Xiang didn't care, but Yu Pinyan deeply remembered the soft touch and scalding temperature on his lips. His eyes instantly became as deep as the sea. Lu, who was following behind the two, felt perilous waves rise in her heart. Although she was a young girl who didn't know much about human affairs, she gradually felt that something was off. This was because Master Ho's gaze towards her master became more and more passionate every day. It was practically enough to make people burn. Chapter 61. Yu Miaoqi and the Lin clan stayed up all night and morning to finally finish reading the account books. Not to mention a hole, they couldn't even find the slightest flaw. Yu Xiang's account books were too meticulous, and the errors were controlled to the tiniest of millimeters. Not to mention the Lin clan, even the Marquis household's matriarch, who raised Yu Pinyan on her own, couldn't compare. If her legs were intact, who knows what kind of amazing person she would be. The Lin clan's self-confidence had completely disappeared after reading the account books. When the matriarch came to chase them away, she almost opened her mouth to return the money. If she lost to a 14-year-old girl, she wouldn't have any face left. However, Yu Miaoqi pulled her back and firmly held her hand, hinting that she shouldn't go back on her words. After bidding farewell to the matriarch, the two returned to the main room with haggard faces. The Lin clan's first reaction was to burn 3 sticks of incense for the memorial tablets in the hall. Then, she knelt down and muttered something. She didn't know what she was saying, but she looked very pained. Yu Miaoqi held her forehead and closed her eyes to rest. When she finished, she asked, "Mother, are you trying to escape again? Do you not want to take charge of the family anymore?" I can't take charge. I've let down I've let down Junjie." The Lin clan began to wipe her tears as she spoke. She didn't feel anything when she was crying, but when she saw the Lin clan crying, Yu Miaoqi felt an indescribable annoyance. She suppressed her resentment and consoled her, "Mother, you and father have a deep relationship. It's inevitable that you'll fall into grief because of his loss. If he knew in the underworld, he would only feel touched. Why would he blame you? If you really feel sorry for him, then you should be even stronger and manage this family well. I still have to marry in the future. What will I do without your help? In this Marquis household, I can only rely on you." She knelt side by side with the Lin clan and said seriously, "Mother, don't be afraid. I'll help you." The members of the Lin clan were greatly moved. They wiped their tears and nodded, then urged their daughter to quickly return to her room to rest. After Yu Miaoqi excused himself from her, he walked into his room one step at a time. However, he didn't go to bed immediately. Instead, he called Mama Kim over to ask about the Marquis household, especially about how Yu Xiang managed the household. He refused to let go of any details. Mama Kim took out a thick book of family rules for her to read while she explained them in detail. She knew in her heart that the Lin clan was unreliable. In the future, she could only rely on the strong 2nd Mississippi. These 108 family rules were personally written by Miss 3. She didn't think that she could live a good life by relying on the Lin clan. The Lin clan wanted to escape at a critical moment. This kind of cowardly character was truly abhorrent. It was no wonder that the mother-in-law and daughter-in-law were at odds with each other and the mother and son broke apart. Because of this, it was impossible for her to take root in the Marquis household by currying favor with the matriarch and Yu Pinyan. After today, they would only compare her with the Lin clan. Then, they would ignore her, alienate her, and treat her coldly. When she was old enough, they would send her far away. Her status would be even lower than that of Wuxia. The situation was very unfavorable for Yu Miaoqi. The only thing she could do was to firmly grasp the power in her hands and make herself strong before she married. Then, she would find a husband with a prominent background. When she reached the peak of her wealth in the future, she would definitely make the matriarch and Yu Pinyin regret it. She would also make Yu Xiang pay back everything they owed her. After sending away Mama Kim, Yu Miaoqi pondered for more than 2 hours. She also wrote down new regulations. Only then did she finally get a good night's sleep. Compared to the main room, which was deserted, the small courtyard in the west wing was very lively. The housekeepers came one after another to ask Miss 3 what they should do now that there was a new master in the residence. They had already heard rumors that the second Miss and Miss 3 did not get along. They had fought several times as soon as they returned. The Lin clan hated Miss 3 even more. If the two of them were in charge, the situation would be very unfavorable for Miss 3. But behind Miss 3 stood Master Ho. Whether or not she was in charge, no one could bully her. On the contrary, as long as she showed a little bit of interest, the housekeepers would be more than happy to obstruct the second Miss and the Lin clan. They would help her take back the power in charge. Although they were very dissatisfied with Yu Xiang at the beginning, as long as they did well, Yu Xiang would give them extra money every month. During the holidays, he would also give them generous bonuses. Compared to the money they could get from the corners, it was a little less. But this money was taken with peace of mind. It was taken honorably, and it didn't bite their hands. Instead, their lives were more comfortable than before. If it was suddenly someone else and the rules were changed, they would be at a loss. They would all run to Miss 3 to make decisions. Yu Xiang lazily leaned on the couch, holding a miscellaneous book in his hand. He waved his hand and said, "Don't ask me for advice. In the future, these things won't be under my control. Don't forget the rules in the residence. Bury your heads in your work and don't let anyone catch you doing something wrong. That's the right thing to do. Leave, I'm going to sleep." He covered his mouth and yawned as he spoke. Don't let anyone catch you doing something wrong. That was true. A new broom sweeps clean. Who knew what the second Miss was thinking? She wasn't like Miss 3. She was fair and square in everything and did things according to the rules. If she didn't like someone, she might find an excuse to remove them and replace them with her own people. The days ahead were going to be difficult. The stewards and mamas understood the lesson. They excused themselves and quietly left the room. They hadn't met Yu Miaoqi yet, but their impression of him had already worsened. They also became more vigilant. When Yu Pinyin returned home, his sister was already asleep. Her small mouth was slightly open, revealing a little lilac tongue. From time to time, she would mumble a few words in her sleep. Her appearance was indescribably lovable and cute. He sat by the couch and stared at her for a long time. He only quietly left when the matriarch sent someone to invite him. When he left, he didn't forget to move his sister's exposed arm under the blanket and gently rubbed her dark red full lips. In the main courtyard, the matriarch was waiting solemnly. When she saw her grandson arrive, she didn't even smile. She bluntly said, "Yandere, I didn't take back your mother's right to manage the household. I'm hoping that she will make a big mistake so that I can expel her from the Marquis household. I've endured for 14 years. I've endured enough." She disobeyed her parents. She rebelled against virtue. She was jealous. She caused chaos in the household. She spoke too much. You see, she's already broken 3 of the 7 rules. If she sincerely repents this time and can conscientiously manage the household well, I'll spare her. If she doesn't repent and causes trouble, I'll have to send her a letter of divorce. Yandere, what do you think? Yu Pinyin sat down and leisurely sipped his tea. He said unconcernedly, if she doesn't do anything wrong, no one can do anything to her. If she makes a mistake, she'll naturally be punished according to the rules. Your grandson will have no objections. What does the Lin clan count for? It makes no difference whether she's in the Fu or not. The matriarch nodded and said tiredly, good. It's good that you can get over it. You've never received a bit of love from her since you were young. Now, you don't need to protect her. You don't owe her anything. Just you wait. Yu Miaoqi has a big heart, but her life is thinner than paper. Sooner or later, she'll cause trouble. I'm not afraid of causing trouble. I just can't let her harm Xiang'er. I often have to run errands outside, so I'll have to trouble the old ancestor to look after me. Yu Pinyin earnestly requested. The matriarch didn't sense anything strange. After putting aside her worries, she smiled and waved her hand, listen to what you're saying. In my heart, Xiang'er is no different from my own granddaughter. Chapter 62. When the mamas received the letter, they immediately came to the main room. Without needing any instructions, they each stood in 3 neat rows according to their positions. When Yu Miaoqi looked over, they took the initiative to report their names and the scope of their duties. Their attitudes were very respectful. Yu Miaoqi originally thought that these people would join forces to give her a show of strength. Then, she would be able to take advantage of the situation to pick out a few thorns and deal with them. She would then quickly gain a foothold in the Marquis household. But she didn't expect them to be so well trained and obedient. Could it be that Yu Xiang didn't secretly incite them to make things difficult for her? Previously, she had thought so well and considered so thoroughly. But now that she saw this group of disciplined and respectful stewards, she felt so sullen in her heart. It was as if she had thrown a heavy punch but hit the air. She had a feeling of wanting to fall to the ground. Yu Miaoqi took a few deep breaths to calm herself down while she was drinking tea. The head of the Lin clan didn't think so much. She only said a few words like, "I'll take care of everything in the future." Then, she turned to her daughter and asked her to take out the draft regulations. This time, Yu Miaoqi wasn't in a hurry to change the rules set by Yu Xiang. She only said 2 points. First, in the future, there was no need to check the memorization of the family rules every month. It was fine as long as everyone knew what to do. Second, even sweeping the floor, chopping firewood, and fetching water had to be elected a group leader. The management staff in the household was too redundant. From now on, the group system would be abolished. Everything would be handled by the corresponding mamas. In the end, she asked if anyone had any opinions. Yu Miaoqi also had her own concerns when making these 2 changes. First, she wanted everyone to relax and show the kindness of the new master. Second, she wanted to win over the hearts of the people, especially the stewards who suddenly had a lot of authority. Third, she wanted to save the allowance given to each group leader to open up sources of income and reduce expenses. She didn't dare to make big moves as soon as she came, so as to avoid distracting the people. Instead, she secretly made small steps and strived to implement them one by one within 3 to 5 months. Not having to memorize the family rules was naturally a good thing. No one objected. Although the team leaders received a monthly allowance, they also had to be responsible for the mistakes made by their team members. Usually, they were under a lot of pressure. In addition, they weren't at the level of a manager, so they couldn't see their master. Their words carried little weight, so even if they had opinions, they couldn't raise them. Seeing that everyone was silent, Yu Miaoqi took it that everyone agreed. Those who had something to say said they had something to say, and those who had nothing to say left. Naturally, everyone had nothing to do. After bowing, they left one after another. The first fire of this new official's appointment was silently lit. The Lin clan was full of praise for their daughter's intelligence and ability. They said that if they handed the family over to their daughter, nothing would go wrong. She felt relieved. After saying that, she walked into the inner hall and continued to reminisce about the past in front of the memorial tablet. In the courtyard of the West Wing, someone immediately reported Yu Miaoqi's actions to Lu Lu, and Lu Lu reported it to Yu Xiang. There won't be any trouble. It's only temporary. Yu Xiang laughed contemptuously as he tied the knots. I've governed the Fu like an iron bucket. She has no place to interfere, so naturally she will break the rules I set. Then she will slowly support her own trusted subordinates. When I was in charge of the household, as long as I did my job well, servants of the same rank would be treated the same. Those with outstanding abilities would even have a chance to be promoted. I didn't care about background or connections. But she can't be as fair as I am. If you want a horse to run, you have to feed it grass. If she feeds her own trusted subordinates, then she will naturally starve others. When others are hungry, they will be jealous. When they are jealous, they will cause trouble. Sooner or later, our Fu will be in chaos. It's like a blindfolded donkey. You only need to whip it, and it will only focus on grinding. When you take off the blindfold one day and let it see the colorful world, will it still care about you? It will slip away long ago. You can't even pull it back. Tao Hong was speechless when he heard this. He asked, Miss, you're not going to do anything. You should at least give her a reminder. When the Fu is in chaos, no one will benefit. Lu Lu glared at her with disdain and mouthed, silly girl. Yu Xiang scratched his head with the needle and sneered, silly girl, if I can see it, how can old ancestor not see it? Yu Miaoqi's mistakes are the same as the Lin clan's mistakes. Old ancestor is waiting to catch the Lin clan's weakness. Think about it. How many of the 7 rules did she commit? She disobeyed her parents, didn't bother her uncles, didn't teach her children, was jealous, and talked too much. If she was in another family, she would have been divorced long ago. It's only because old ancestor is soft-hearted and hasn't had time to spare these years that he let her go. Just wait and see. If they cause trouble this time, old ancestor definitely won't let them off easily. One will be divorced, the other will either be locked up for a few years or be married off far away. Tao Hong was speechless when he heard this. He didn't dare to say anything else. In the main courtyard, the matriarch also received the news. She knew that Yu Miaoqi didn't make any big moves and only abolished 2 rules that were neither light nor heavy. Thus, she sighed to Mama Ma, I thought she was very scheming, but she's also short-sighted. These 2 abolished rules were indeed insignificant, but she didn't think too deeply about it. Those servants were under control all year round, so they had a clear division of labor. She suddenly removed the power to control them, so the division of labor was also unclear. There was no conclusion as to who was responsible for this matter and who was responsible for that matter. Wouldn't this make the servants anxious? You push me, I push you. No one can do the work. Sooner or later, there will be chaos in the Fu. For example, if you suddenly let go of the power that was holding onto it, it would instantly relax and inevitably fall down. Management is also a kind of knowledge. Its principles are similar to governing a country. Governing a country strictly means that the world is clear and bright. Governing a country is biased and chaotic. In the end, Yu Miaoqi can't compare to Xiang or A. Mama Ma agreed, that's natural. After all, Miss Xiang'er was personally taught by Yu and Master Ho. Ordinary people can't compare to her. The matriarch's mood eased a little. She muttered in a low voice, in the end, the family Shen is a businessman. His knowledge is shallow. The children he taught are really unpresentable. Mama Ma nodded in agreement. What the 2 didn't know was that it wasn't that the family Shen didn't know how to discipline, but that he didn't dare to discipline. Just looking at Shen Yuanqi, he was extremely outstanding among thousands of people. In the end, Yu Miaoqi was held too high by the family Shen. He accidentally killed himself and became what he was today. Because Yu Miaoqi's methods were gentle and gradual, and she secretly looked for trusted aides who could support her, the Marquis household didn't cause any trouble for the next half a month. She gradually relaxed. On this day, Yu Xiu, who had been hiding in the house and didn't go out, suddenly came to the door with many gifts. Yu Miaoqi smiled and let her into the house. There wasn't the slightest bit of ill will between them. Yu Xiu exchanged a few words and stammered, "Younger sister, it's not that elder sister covets mother's dowry. It's just that I don't dare to refuse elder sister's gift. In that situation, if I insisted on refusing, wouldn't the old ancestor be even angrier? I had no choice. Mother doesn't blame me, right? How could the Lin clan not blame her?" Later, when Yu Miaoqi learned about the value of the shops and fields, her heart bled. She wanted to eat Yu Xiu alive. Yu Miaoqi lowered her eyes and drank her tea. When she spoke again, her tone was indescribably warm and cheerful. How could mother blame elder sister? Mother has neglected elder sister a lot these years. This time, she's done her best to add to elder sister's dowry. When the time comes, I'll also prepare a generous gift for elder sister to complete our sisterly relationship. Yu Xiu was greatly moved. She held her hand and praised, "Younger sister is still the most considerate. You're not like Yu Xiang, who's cold-hearted and cold-hearted." Yu Miaoqi covered her mouth and chuckled. The two continued to chat. When they were about to leave, Yu Xiu said, "I heard that younger sister is now in charge of the household. If you're too busy, I can help. Younger sister also knows that I'll be getting married in about a year and a half. It's time for me to learn how to manage the household. Elder sister hasn't learned before. Daughters of ordinary families start learning when they're 7 or 8 years old." Yu Miaoqi pretended to be surprised. Yu Xiu's eyes were filled with tears. She pointed to the west wing and then pointed to the main courtyard. She grumbled in a low voice, "One is overbearing and savage, and the other is selfish and biased. I'm struggling to survive in the cracks. How can I learn real skills? I'm just passing my days in vain. Good elder sister, then younger sister will have to rely on you in the future." Yu Miaoqi agreed without hesitation. After sending off Yu Xiu, her face immediately sank. She sent the maidservants away and called Mama Kim over. "Have the people you sent to Yangzhou sent back any news? When can they get rid of Yu Xiu? I think she's really an eyesore." After the farce in the main courtyard, Yu Miaoqi didn't bother to pretend to be virtuous and gentle anymore. She completely revealed the crafty nature she had developed in the family shen. Mama Kim didn't feel disappointed. Instead, she was happy to see it happen. Madam was unreliable. Second young miss should be more unyielding. She smiled and said, replying, "Second young miss, I just received news that Fang family's mother and son have been persuaded and are rushing to the capital. They should arrive in 7 or 8 days. 7 or 8 days. Don't make any mistakes." Yu Miaoqi rubbed her forehead. Mama Kim quickly waved her hand, "There won't be any mistakes. That mother and son are in dire straits right now. They don't even have a place to shelter from the wind and rain, let alone a full meal. They're about to die. How can they not hold on to Yu Xiu, this life-saving straw? They're even more anxious than us. That's good. When this matter is completed, I'll reward you handsomely. Also, I asked you to find some trustworthy servants to support them. Have you made any progress? I still need to observe for a while. Young miss, don't worry. The power is in your hands. We don't need to spend any effort to find them. Naturally, someone will come to your door." "That's true." The two were discussing when they heard someone report from outside the room, "Second young miss, Chunmei and Dongshui request an audience." Yu Miaoqi looked at Mama Kim with an inquiring gaze. Mama Kim lowered her voice and introduced, "These two were originally given to Master Ho by the old madam. For some reason, they were sent to the sewing room by Miss 3. It's been almost 4 years, but they haven't even seen Master Ho's face. Master Ho doesn't care, so the old madam won't stand up for them. They see that you're the head of the household and are begging you to come. After all, you're an unmarried girl. It's not good for you to intervene. It's better to let madam make the decision. Just now, I said that you don't need to worry. See, they came to find you on their own. Yu Miaoqi nodded slightly. After pondering for a moment, she said, tell mother to transfer them back to eldest brother's courtyard. One of them will help him with his grooming and the other will help him with his brush and ink. Eldest brother has already been crowned, so he can't not have anyone to warm his bed for him. Wouldn't it be a joke if word got out? She should find some beautiful concubines to distract Yu Pinyin. It would be best if he quickly got married. If he had wives and concubines, he would have a house full of children. How would he have the mind to care about Yu Pinyin? At that time, even the old madam wouldn't be able to take care of her. The more she thought about it, the more she felt that it was feasible. She pulled on Mama Kim, who was about to leave, and asked, is eldest brother engaged? He is. Mama Kim nodded, he was betrothed before he was born. The other party is the legitimate daughter of Duke Jingguofu. However, she's currently in mourning, so the marriage has been delayed. Mama Kim spent all day with the Lin clan. She had also lost her power, so her eyes and ears were naturally not as sharp as before. She didn't receive any news that the old madam and Yu Pinyin wanted to break off the engagement. Not only her, but most of the servants also didn't know of their master's plans. They thought that Chang Yafu was going to marry into the family as soon as he left the service. Yu Miaoqi thought for a moment, then asked, how long will she be in mourning? Not long. She'll be able to leave the service by the end of next month. Mama Kim counted on her fingers. Okay, I understand. Take Chun Mei and Dong Shui to mother. Yu Miaoqi sent Mama Kim away and couldn't help but smile in relief. Then she thought about how the new daughter-in-law would be in charge of the family's finances after marrying into the family. Her face darkened as she pondered how to deal with it. However, as long as the Lin clan didn't let go and the daughter-in-law couldn't forcefully snatch it away, then she could take a few more beautiful concubines for Yu Pinyin. The legitimate daughter of Duke Jingguofu wouldn't have the time to care about anything else. Yu Miaoqi leaned back in her chair. Many thoughts spun in her mind, and her expression slowly changed from hesitation to determination. The author has something to say, thank you to my rich friends, and thank you to all the friends who supported the original version. Moi. Chapter 63. Chun Mei and Dong Shui received approval from the Lin clan. The next morning, they dressed up carefully and left the sewing room with 2 small bags. On the way, they stopped to say goodbye to familiar maids. Master Ho doesn't have a single woman by his side. I heard that all the maids in the early years were all. One of them made a gesture of cutting her throat and warned, you have to be careful. Master Ho isn't that easy to serve. It's hard to say whether this job is a blessing or a curse. The other person nodded in agreement, yes, everyone calls Master Ho the living king of hell. Every day, he goes out clean and always comes back with the smell of blood. The maids in the laundry room are most afraid of washing Master Ho's clothes. They often carry a basin full of blood and pour it out. It's scary. I heard that Master Ho's aura is so gloomy and terrifying because he has killed too many people. The vengeful spirits around him don't disperse all year round. You too should be more careful. The young maid who was very close to them sneered, enough, don't say the grapes are sour. It's because Master Ho doesn't have a woman by his side that Chun Mei and Dong Shui have a future. Which man isn't lustful? Master Ho didn't say anything before because Miss 3 was the head of the family. He couldn't let his sister touch a woman, right? This time, it's Madam's turn to arrange it. He will naturally accept it. After saying that, she took their arms and said in a flattering tone, "Sisters, don't forget to help your younger sister when you are rich in the future." Chun Mei and Dong Shui pursed their lips and smiled. Their cheeks were flushed, looking very beautiful and pleasant. It wasn't that they hadn't heard the rumors outside the Fu. What about killing people like Flax, being cold-blooded and ruthless, and not recognizing his own family? In their eyes, Master Ho's unusually handsome face and monstrous power could not compare. It was said that wealth came from danger. If they were lucky enough to become Master Ho's first woman, what else could they not have in the future? The two of them were calculating and guarding against each other. They swayed their small waists and walked to the front yard with small steps. The group of maidservants sent them off with envious, worried, and mocking gazes. Today was the day off. It was rare that Yu Pinyin didn't have to go to the yamen. He carried his sister to pay respects to the matriarch first, then brought her back to the study to practice calligraphy. Yu Xiang sat in front of a slightly short desk and wrote a word. He glanced at his elder brother who was leaning against the window and studying the Go record. He wanted to say something but hesitated. "Stop looking. No matter how much you look, you have to finish practicing the calligraphy. You should calculate how much homework you've missed." Yu Pinyin sneered without looking up. Yu Xiang put down the brush and complained, "Brother, I only know a few words. Are you going to teach me to be a great scholar? I don't have that talent. Look at little Jiu, her. She's only 12 years old and she doesn't need to study anymore. She eats, drinks, and plays all day long, living a happy life. It wasn't easy for me to take care of the family, so you should let me relax for a few days. Do you want me to play Go with you?" Yu Pinyin's lips curved slightly, but his words were full of disdain. The 9th princess can play shamelessly in front of the emperor in order to play truant. You should also play shamelessly in front of your brother. Also, your Go skills are too bad. You don't count when I give you 10 moves, but you take back 3 moves after 2 moves. How about I play with my left and right hands? Thinking of little Jiu playing shamelessly in front of the emperor, Yu Xiang felt embarrassed. He face-bombed and sighed, "If you want to talk, just talk. Why do you have to expose my past? I'll just write." The study quieted down again. Half an hour later, Yu Xiang knocked the brush against the inkstone and shouted, "Today's homework is finished. Brother, come take a look." Yu Pinyin put down the Go record and walked over to take a look. He shook his head and sighed, "How come you haven't improved after 4 years of teaching? You have form but no spirit, and your strength is weak. Even writing a greeting card is embarrassing." Yu Xiang shook her sore wrists and angrily said, "I was born with this much strength. How can I reach the point where I can penetrate the back of the paper? Brother, you're forcing me too much." Yu Pinyin smiled. He took out a piece of white paper and spread it out. He hugged his sister on his knees and held her small hand that was holding the brush. He gently said, "Brother will teach you. You can figure out how to use your strength. The strength of the handwriting doesn't depend on the person, but the angle of the brush and the speed of the brush." The elegant scent of sandalwood surrounded her. Strong arms wrapped around her armpits. Her back leaned against a broad and warm chest. She could faintly feel a steady heartbeat through the cloth. It was an indescribable feeling of snuggling. Even if Yu Xiang had a bellyful of complaints, she couldn't voice them out. She obediently nodded and then secretly glanced at her brother's side face with the tips of her ears red. Yu Pinyin pretended not to know. He held her small hand and wrote very slowly. A few lines of poetry spread out on the paper, telling a certain someone's indescribable feelings. The autumn wind is clear, the autumn moon is bright, the fallen leaves gather and scatter, the jackdaws are startled when they perch. Lovesickness knows when we will meet again. This night is embarrassing. Enter my lovesickness door, know my lovesickness bitterness. Long lovesickness brings back memories. Short lovesickness brings back endless. After he finished writing, Yu Xiang murmured a few times. It was as if a small stone had been thrown into the lake of her heart, creating layers of ripples. There was also a subtle, indescribable feeling that quickly slipped through her mind. When she was about to grasp it, it dissipated like smoke. She blinked and her eyes were slightly absent-minded. She asked, "Why didn't you finish the last line?" There was indeed a last line. If I had known it would trip people's hearts, I would have never met them. Yu Pinyin carefully observed her expression. After a while, he sighed and said, "The last line is quite inauspicious, so I might as well not write it." How could they not know each other? Then where should she place her love in this life? Yu Xiang nodded blankly. Just as she was about to change the topic, two graceful maidservants came in from outside the door. They had exquisite makeup on their faces and were carrying parcels in their hands. They were twisting their small waists and squatting to salute. Their voices were as mellow as trickling spring water. Reporting to Master Ho, "Madam ordered us to come and serve you." The maidservant in the aqua-blue robe smiled charmingly. "My name is Chunmei." The maidservant in the emerald-green robe quickly glanced at Yu Pinyin and said shyly, "My name is Dong Shui." Soon after, they said in unison, "Madam ordered us to help you wash up in the morning and evening, and to serve you brush and ink during the day. Master Ho, if you need anything in the future, please instruct us." Yu Pinyin raised his eyebrows and didn't say anything. The blush on Yu Xiang's face quickly faded. She said coldly, "You two don't need to serve me here. Go back where you came from." Chunmei and Dong Shui had the Lin clan's support and wanted to take a gamble. Unexpectedly, they squatted in place and didn't move. As they replied, they looked at Master Ho with pitiful eyes. "Reporting to Miss 3, this is Madam's order. We don't dare to disobey. Moreover, Master Ho doesn't have any maidservants to serve him. It's inconvenient." Yu Xiang coldly interrupted the two, "You call it inconvenient because he doesn't have any maidservants to serve him? Do you think all the guards and manservants in the courtyard are dead? Didn't you hear me tell you to scram? Do you want me to order people to drag you out?" Yu Pinyin, who had been silent for a while, slowly opened his mouth. "Xianger, why are you chasing them away?" The two maidservants were pleasantly surprised, but Yu Xiang looked at him with a stunned expression. After a moment of silence, she suddenly threw the brush in her hand to the ground. Thick black ink stained her hand, and she tore the rice paper on the table into pieces. She angrily said, "I'm not writing anymore. You can stay if you want. I'm going back. Let go of me." As she spoke, she kept struggling, and her eyes gradually turned red. Yu Pinyin hurriedly held her body and waved his hand at the two guards standing at the door. The guards stepped forward and dragged the two maidservants, who didn't have time to hide their surprised expressions, away. Yu Pinyin forcefully held the crazy tigress in his arms and asked in a low voice, "Why are you throwing a tantrum? Even if you want to chase them away, you should at least give Big Brother a reason. Tell me that your attachment to me isn't a childish possessiveness, but a clear love between a man and a woman. A reason? What kind of reason could Yu Xiang give? Say that my world only has you, and your world will have concubines and children, and then you will naturally forget about me? In order to monopolize you, in order to avoid the foreseeable future, I don't dare to let anyone near you." She knew that her thoughts were morbid, and she couldn't resort to words, but she would rather kill herself than turn back. She desperately blinked, trying to hold back the rapidly secreting tears, but she didn't succeed. She could only use the back of her hand to wipe away her tears. She angrily said, "There's no reason, I'm just this unreasonable. Let go, I don't want to see you. You always lie to me." Yu Pinyin was hesitating whether to directly expose her identity or to deepen her attachment to him. He was in a dilemma, and when he looked down, he couldn't help but laugh. He saw that the little girl's face was not only covered with tears, but also smeared with ink from her fingers. She looked very pitiful and very funny. Laugh, 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 Yu Xiang became more and more indignant. She accused, I only hear the laughter of the newcomers, but I don't hear the tears of the old. You heartless man. What did this have to do with? Yu Pinyin couldn't hold back anymore. He wiped his sister's tears and blew her nose while laughing loudly. Silly girl, where did the newcomers and old come from? Older brothers, newcomers and old friends are all you, only you. Quickly look, I've already sent those 2 girls away. In the future, I won't let them step into the front courtyard. He pinched his sister's chin and made her look at the door. He continued to coax her, don't cry, you're breaking older brother's heart. Older brother only likes you. Tears hung on her eyelashes, blurring her vision. Yu Xiang tried hard to open her eyes. Sure enough, when she saw that there was no one at the door, she slowly stopped sobbing. She wanted to laugh through her tears, but she felt that it was too embarrassing. She only pursed her lips and glared at her older brother. Yu Pinyin held his sister's cat-like face and laughed for a long time before he ordered Lulu to bring in a basin of water. He carefully wiped the ink off her face and hands. He sighed helplessly in his heart, forget it, if I can't get an answer, I won't ask. I really can't stand her tearful appearance. Little vinegar jar, why are you so jealous? Yu Pin pinched his sister's fair and clear cheeks and scolded her in a low voice, but his tone was full of satisfaction. Yu Xiang originally didn't want to pay attention to him, but when she met his deep and tender eyes, the corners of her lips unconsciously curled up, and she softly snorted like a cat. Yu Pinyin loved her coquettish look so much that he would never get tired of it. He held her in his arms and rubbed her for a long time. Then, he kissed her on the top of her head, which was filled with fragrance, like the wings of a butterfly. Lulu poured some water and stood in the corridor, scratching his heart and lungs. He was about to clench his teeth and urge Miss to go back when Mama Ma hurriedly ran over and said, the old lady asked Master Ho to hurry over. Eldest Miss is making a scene. What's the matter? Lulu hurriedly asked. Hey, what else could it be? Marriage. Marriage? With the Fong family? No wonder eldest Miss is making a scene. The Fong family is already ruined. How can she get married? Lulu put down the basin and hurriedly ran in to report. The author has something to say, I've been sick recently, so my dear boyfriend came all the way to see me. He went on a date today. I'll post the list tomorrow. After posting the new chapter, I went to take a shower and put on makeup. I dressed up beautifully. La 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 oh, greater than over equal to V, O P.S., Babe has always said that my pace is slow and the plot is slow. After deep reflection, I realized that it's not the plot that's slow, it's me that's slower. So I've decided to start a double update from Christmas Eve until the end of this article. If I can't do it, I'll go eat sh*t. Screenshot as proof. As for before Christmas Eve, because I have to hand over the house on December 31st, I have to look at the furniture and appliances these days. I'm a bit busy. Chapter 64. Although the matriarch was dissatisfied with the Lin clan, she usually didn't pay much attention to her. If she hadn't come to the main courtyard to make a fuss last time, the matriarch wouldn't have used such vicious words to reprimand her. After the Lin clan returned home, they reflected for several days and developed an indescribable fear of the matriarch. Therefore, they also understood that the military order they made that day was a huge weakness. If she made a mistake, the matriarch definitely wouldn't be as lenient as before. She would definitely take out a lawsuit and divorce letter to drive her out. Where could she go if she left the Marquis household? Her biological younger brother was unreliable, and her elder brother had already become enemies. She was a woman with a large amount of dowry. She would only be eaten alive by people with bad intentions. This hidden worry would appear from time to torment her, but she didn't dare to confide in her daughter. She only repeatedly warned her daughter not to make any mistakes and to please the matriarch and Yupinian. At first, Yu Miaoqi was patient enough to agree, but seeing her mention it every day, her heart began to feel uneasy. In addition, the person she sent to investigate Shen Yuanqi replied that he was from Lingnan. Because of the death of his parents, the Shui clan adopted him. Although they couldn't find the time when he was sold as a slave, it sounded like the person in her memory. There was also a vivid portrait attached. Yu Miaoqi opened the portrait and looked at it. Immediately, her face turned pale with fright. Even if this face was burned to ashes, she would still recognize it. Wasn't this the family Shen's legitimate son, Shen Yuanqi? He actually had such good fortune. Yes, the family he sold himself to was surnamed Shui. They were a famous noble family in the Lingnan area. Not only were they rich, but they also had some influence in the court. As long as he wasn't a pedantic person who didn't know how to adapt, with this kind of background, sooner or later he would be able to make a name for himself. Moreover, he was extremely intelligent and talented. Yu Miaoqi burned the portrait. She felt as if her heart was being licked by the flames. The pain of the burning was indescribable. How could the heavens be so unfair? Not only did they give the Chen siblings exceptional looks, but they also gave them great luck. They were always able to turn danger into safety and come back from death's door. However, he was extremely stingy towards her. Behind every twist of fate was a hidden misfortune, making her tired of dealing with it. That night, she drank a pot of old wine until she was drunk and barely managed to fall asleep. The next day, she went to greet the old lady with a throbbing head. The old madam could not bear to see the mother and daughter pair. Although Fang Jichen was not convicted, his scholarly achievements were used to redeem his mother. The Fang family's wealth was confiscated. That mother and son are now homeless and miserable, suffering from hunger and cold. They are waiting for your dowry to save their lives. Since you are so in love with him, I will fulfill your wish. At this point, the old lady did not care about Yu Siyu's shock and absent-mindedness. She waved at Mama Ma, have Fu Shun take people to Yangzhou. They must bring back the Fang family's mother and son intact. They are my Marquis Yomla's future in-laws. Do not neglect them. Mama Ma agreed in a low voice and was about to leave when Yu Siyu suddenly came back to her senses and pulled on her sleeve. She hurriedly shouted, "You can't go. You can't go." After shouting several times, she looked at the old lady suspiciously and asked, "Old ancestor, you must be lying to granddaughter, right?" Young Master Fang was appointed as the Tanhua Lang by the emperor and was also appointed as the Zhizhou of Yangzhou. His imperial favor is comparable to that of the top scholar. If there really was a problem with his family, how could the emperor be so lenient? You must be lying to me. You are biased and can't bear to see your granddaughter live a good life. You are really old and muddle-headed. Towards the end, her expression gradually became deranged. She laughed and cried, scolded and shouted. Her appearance was very frightening. The peerless riches and honor that she had dreamed of for a long time turned into ashes in the blink of an eye. After her lover turned from an elegant young master to a criminal official in the blink of an eye, the huge psychological gap made her lose her composure. Moreover, she was seen as a joke by so many people. She even had the heart to die. The old lady did not ask anyone to pull her back, nor did she speak. She only waved at Mama Ma and ordered her to go find Master Ho. A blockhead needs to be hit with a heavy hammer. Otherwise, he can forget about being enlightened for the rest of his life. When Yu Pinyin came over with Yu Xiang in her arms, Yu Siyu was still shouting things like, "Impossible." It was as if she was unwilling to face reality. When she saw her eldest brother come, it was as if she had grasped at a life-saving straw. She hurriedly asked, "Eldest brother, the old ancestor is just scaring me, right? How could something happen to the Fong family? Young Master Fong just came in third place. His Majesty personally praised him. Yu Pinyin gently placed his little sister on the soft couch and sat down next to her. He tidied up his little sister's skirt and poured a cup of hot tea for her. Only then did he leisurely say, I personally plucked Fong Lianqing's head off on the day Yu Miaoqi returned home. It was just a short sentence, but Yu Xiu felt as if she had been struck by lightning. She immediately sat paralyzed on the ground, unable to get up. After a long while, she finally cried, Eldest brother, how can you be so cruel? You clearly know that I have an engagement with young Master Fong, so why didn't you show mercy and let his family go? You're harming me. How can you not recognize your own family to this extent? Yu Xiang nibbled on a pastry and drank a mouthful of honey tea. When she heard these words, she became unhappy and threw the pastry at her. She scolded, do you know what you're saying? You let older brother save the person that His Majesty wanted to kill. The Fong family's crime was cleared, but you let older brother bear the crime of bending the law for personal gain. Are you afraid that His Majesty doesn't suspect older brother enough? Older brother already has countless enemies in court. If he's not careful, he'll be impeached by the imperial censor. He's always been in charge of legal matters, but you let him bend the law for personal gain. Do you know what crime Fong Lianqing was beheaded for? It was dereliction of duty and bending the law for personal gain. What do you mean by saying this? You want older brother to sacrifice his future and even his life for your marriage? Yu Xiu, do you know what your surname is? Who is your family? You traitorous, heartless and unscrupulous thing. See if I don't smash you to death. She only stopped scolding after smashing 3 or 4 pastries. Her cheeks were puffed up as she gasped for air. Yu Pinyin was originally a bit annoyed, but when he saw her indignant appearance, he was instantly overjoyed. He pursed his lips to stifle his laughter as he picked up the teacup and slowly fed her some water. Of her 2 biological granddaughters, one wholeheartedly schemed against her own family, and the other wholeheartedly sided with outsiders. She didn't know what kind of sin the family Yu had committed to raise these 2 things. Although Xiang'er wasn't her biological granddaughter, she was better than her biological granddaughter. She didn't waste this fate. The matriarch's terrible mood finally improved slightly. She looked askance at Yu Xiu, who was in a sorry state, and said, it's said that when a girl is of age, she can't be kept at home. If she's kept, she'll become an enemy. You really have a deep grudge with your older brother. That's fine, I'll marry you to the Fong family tomorrow. You can go back and prepare. Yu Xiu no longer held any hope in her heart. She wiped away the crumbs of pastries on her forehead and shouted, don't, old ancestor. Granddaughter knows her wrongs. Please forgive me this time. The Fong family has already been ruined. You can't marry me over. Wasn't this what you begged for? How many times did I persuade you in the beginning? You can count on your fingers. The matriarch sneered. Yu Xiang secretly pulled out a file from the matriarch's palm and flipped through it. Sure enough, it recorded the information of unmarried men who didn't have high status in the capital but were of good character. There was also a small picture on each page. It was a matchmaking booklet. Sure enough, the matriarch was just scaring Yu Xiu. In fact, she had already found a candidate for her and was just waiting for her to choose. If Yu Xiu's ambitions weren't so high and her eyelids weren't so shallow, her future days would be very comfortable. Let's not talk about the distant future for now. At the very least, she would be more comfortable than Yu Miaoqi, who was more ambitious. She was the female lead. In the future, she would marry the emperor. She just didn't know which prince she would marry. If it was the crown prince, it would be fine. If it was someone else, the marquis household would be in danger. Thinking of this, Yu Xiang's heart trembled. She pondered how to ruin Yu Miaoqi's marriage. Regardless of the plot, protecting her older brother was the most important thing. Her older brother had a close relationship with the crown prince and held a lot of power in his hands. If the other princes wanted to fight for the throne, their first target would undoubtedly be her older brother. The more Yu Xiang thought about it, the more worried she became. She couldn't help but look at Yu Miaoqi with a cold gaze. Yu Miaoqi also happened to look up at her. Her face paled and she quickly lowered her head. Although she was the true legitimate daughter of the Marquis household, she didn't know why, but she always felt like she couldn't raise her head in front of Yu Xiang. Because of this, the resentment and unwillingness in her heart grew stronger day by day. Yu Xiu didn't have the mind to observe the undercurrent between the two of them. She only knelt on the ground and kowtowed, begging for mercy. At this time, she suddenly understood why the old matriarch and Yu Xiang kept asking her if she would regret it. It turned out that everything they said was true. It wasn't because they couldn't bear to see her doing well that they deliberately tried to deceive her. Would she regret it? Of course. She regretted it so much that her intestines turned green. She couldn't wait to turn back time. She wanted to kill the Pei clan who kept talking about how the Fong family was rich and how outstanding their son was. The author has something to say: thank you to my rich friends, and thank you to all the friends who supported the original novel. Moi. Chapter 65. The matriarch wanted to scare her, so she let her kowtow and admit her mistake without responding. She picked up the teacup and slowly sipped. Mama Ma brought over a new plate of pastries. Yu Xiang nibbled on them as she flipped through the booklet. From time to time, she would brush away the crumbs that had fallen onto the pages. Yu Pinyin caught a glimpse of a small portrait of a man attached to the booklet. His face darkened for a moment. He was about to reach out and snatch the booklet when his sister tilted her head towards the old ancestor. She pointed at a small portrait and mouthed silently, "This is not bad." The matriarch looked down and saw that it was the one she liked the most. The corners of her mouth couldn't help but curl up slightly. Xiang'er was still the most down-to-earth and clear-sighted. Although he came from a poor family and didn't have a high official position, he had good morals and a generous temper. Furthermore, his family was simple and had strict rules. A man could only take a concubine when he was over 40 and didn't have a son. He could be considered a good match. If a girl were to marry into his family, there would be no in-laws to make things difficult for her and no concubines to annoy her. As long as she was able to conceive a legitimate son, her life would be extremely comfortable. Yu Xiang observed the matriarch's expression. Seeing the smile in her eyes, she knew what was going on. Instead, she felt envious of Yu Xiu. Yu Pinyin pursed his thin lips and pulled out the booklet in her hand. He quickly skimmed through it and his gaze stopped at the line, "Man can only take a concubine when he is over 40 and doesn't have a son." His little vinegar jar had probably chosen this person because of this point. After thinking for a moment, he smiled slightly and casually tossed the booklet to the side. It was enough to have Xiang'er in this life. He only needed to protect Xiang'er and live with her alone. He thought that in the future, he would definitely make her happy and satisfied. Yu Xiang glared at her older brother. She picked up the booklet that was about to fall and placed it on the Kong table. Yu Xiu was still begging for mercy, but Yu Miaoqi had already noticed the small movements above. She looked around the booklet and immediately knelt down to plead, "Grandmother, please have mercy and forgive my older sister this time. That Fong family has declined to such a state that I can't get married. If word of this got out, won't people laugh at me, Marquis Yongle?" Since the old madam didn't want Yu Xiu to marry into the Fong family, she would do her a favor. Anyway, when the Fong family's mother and son quarrel, Yu Xiu would have to marry even if she didn't want to. I, Marquis Yongle, have never been afraid of being laughed at. Let them say whatever they want. The old lady snorted. Yu Miaoqi continued to dissuade her. Grandmother, even if you don't think about the reputation of the Marquis family, you should think about my sister's happiness. Can you bear to see her marry into such a family and live in hunger and cold? It's not that I'm heartless. She was the one who made up her mind. It's not that I didn't try to persuade her, but she herself said that she wasn't interested in young Master Fang's family background, but his character. Since she felt that love was enough, I couldn't help but agree. The old madam didn't relent in the slightest. She was determined to teach Wuxia an unforgettable lesson. Wuxia had long since regretted her decision. She wished that she could break her head and make the old madam's heart soften. She immediately spoke the truth. Old ancestor, your granddaughter was wrong. Your granddaughter lied. Your granddaughter wasn't interested in young Master Fang's character, but his family's wealth. I was interested in his family's wealth. Now, I understand the principle of wealth is like smoke and clouds, cherish it as you go. You tried to persuade me several times before, but it was all for my own good. I was wrong, very wrong. Please forgive me this time. After she finished speaking, she kowtowed several times. Yu Miaoqi also kowtowed. When she straightened her back, she didn't forget to wipe Wuxia's tears. She seemed to empathize with her and felt pity for her. Yu Xiang coldly observed her actions and couldn't help but sneer inwardly. She knew that this person was the female lead. Her ability to stir up trouble was top-notch. As soon as she returned home, Yu Xiang ordered people to keep a close eye on her. How could she not know what she did to ruin Wuxia? Behind her back, her methods were insidious. On the surface, she appeared gentle and graceful, but when she really sold Wuxia still had to help her count the money. Look, this idiot was so moved that she held her hands and cried. If she knew the truth, she would be angered to death. Of course, at the same time, Yu Xiang also learned that Yu Miaoqi's servant girl was secretly inquiring about the Zhuangyuan. However, there were many girls in the capital who were inquiring about the Zhuangyuan. Even the princesses frequently found excuses to wander around the Shui estate. She didn't take it seriously and only thought that this servant girl was in love. As a result, it took a long time before she realized that the person was actually her own brother. When the matriarch saw that Wuxia had already realized her mistake, her expression relaxed. She threw the booklet in her hand over, take a good look. Choose one in 3 days, and I will send someone to discuss marriage for you. If you continue to make excuses, you might as well not marry and go to the countryside to accompany your Yinyang in her old age. The Lin clan finally opened her mouth, why haven't you thanked old ancestor yet? Wuxia suddenly came back to her senses and hurriedly kowtowed to the matriarch. Then she picked up the booklet and sat down with Yu Miaoqi's help. Her face immediately turned from deathly white to a purplish red. She finally realized that the matriarch was deliberately scaring her today. Otherwise, why would she prepare such a thick booklet? Presumably, she had already started looking for someone several months ago. Realizing this, the gratitude that had just risen in her heart turned into resentment. She unconsciously clenched her fists so tightly that the booklet crumpled. The matriarch's eyes darkened slightly. She sighed silently, forget it. Sending her out is already doing my best. In the future, I won't care if she lives or dies. How could each and every one of them be so ungrateful? Yu Xiang was still considering whether or not she should secretly help Wuxia, but seeing this scene, she immediately dispelled the idea. She raised her hand and used her handkerchief to cover the sneer at the corner of her mouth. When the Lin clan mother and daughter saw that the matter had been settled, they stood up to leave. However, they were stopped by Yu Pinyin, Yu Miaoqi, in the future, if you stuff people into my courtyard again, you can go back to where you came from. My prefecture you can't afford to provide for a great Buddha like you. Big brother, what are you talking about? Miaoqi doesn't understand. This was the first time that Yu Pinyin had clearly expressed his intention to drive her out of the Marquis household. She was so scared that her face turned white. No matter how many schemes she had, she couldn't come up with anything. The Lin clan mother was stunned. She immediately explained, "Yandere, you've misunderstood. Those two people were sent by me. You're already 21 years old now. You should have a few people by your side who care about you." With just a few words, the matriarch understood that Madame Lin and her daughter had stuffed a bed warmer next to her grandson. She nodded and said, "Since it was arranged by your mother, you should accept it. Don't you know how old you are?" In the past, when her granddaughter was in charge of the family, her grandson never opened his mouth. The matriarch's days had been too leisurely, so she had forgotten about such an important matter. Yu Pinyin's tone was mocking. "You arranged it. You can take the initiative to think of me. Mother, don't joke around." Then he looked askance at Yu Miaoqi and warned in a low voice, "You've only just taken over the household, yet you're stuffing people into your brother's side. You're reaching too far." The Lin clan mother and daughter were so ashamed and angry that they wanted to die. Only then did they realize that Yu Pinyin's impression of them had risen from indifference and alienation to loathing. When he didn't like someone, no matter what that person said or did, it was wrong. But this time, the matriarch didn't feel that Yu Miaoqi was wrong. Although it was indeed inappropriate for a girl like her to meddle in her brother's affairs, it was also for the sake of the Marquis household's children. Just as she was about to say a few good words to have her grandson accept the person, Yu Pinyin cautiously said, "Old ancestor, don't forget how your grandson was poisoned that year. I didn't ask or investigate. I only begged a few times and they sent the person over. Do you think your grandson isn't dying fast enough? Moreover, there are so many confidential files in my courtyard. If one or two of them were to be leaked, the Marquis household would be destroyed. Therefore, your grandson can't accept a servant who I don't know the background of, and I don't dare to accept." Her grandson had been poisoned 3 times that year. The first 2 times, they couldn't find the cause. It was only after they sent people to secretly monitor the situation that they found out that the person who poisoned her grandson was the personal servant girl who had taken care of him since he was young. As they continued to investigate, the matriarch was almost scared to death. The servant girls and manservants who were slightly closer to her grandson had all been secretly bribed. That year, those people were willing to go to such lengths just for a title of nobility. Now, her grandson was an official and had grasped the dark secrets of countless officials. If the woman sent to his side was a spy sent by someone, it wouldn't be a small matter. If it was light, her grandson's reputation would be ruined. If it was heavy, the prefecture would be exterminated. The matriarch was fine before she thought about it, but once she thought about it, she was so frightened that she broke out in a cold sweat. Her hand that held the prayer beads began to tremble. Flustered and exasperated, she said, "Lin clan, if you want to manage the household, I'll let you. But you're not allowed to meddle in the affairs of Yandere's courtyard. If there's a next time, get out of my sight." As Yu Xian leaned over to pat the matriarch's back, she threw a mocking glance at Yu Miaoqi, who was fearfully admitting her mistake. Yu Miaoqi's originally pale complexion immediately turned ashen. The matriarch caught her breath and held her granddaughter's fair and tender hand. She sighed and said, "Xiang is still the most reliable. When Xiang was managing the household, there weren't so many filthy things. An unmarried girl meddling in her brother's affairs, who taught you this rule? You should have some face in the future. Go, go, go. Just looking at you makes me annoyed." The Lin clan mother and daughter kowtowed and apologized, then walked out with weak steps. When Yu saw that someone was suffering with her, her mood improved considerably. She hurriedly went forward to support Yu Miaoqi and even gave her a reassuring smile. Chapter 66. Wuxia tossed and turned for 8 days before deciding on a candidate. It turned out to be the nephew of the matriarch's eldest sister-in-law's brother. Although their relationship was a bit distant, they usually had contact with each other. This person was 20 years old and had just been crowned. He had already participated in the imperial examinations twice and failed both times. However, his appearance was very elegant and handsome. In addition, his father was the chancellor of the imperial college. Although he had no real power, he was very noble. This person was the least talented of all the candidates. If it weren't for the fact that he was related to the matriarch and came from a scholarly family, the matriarch wouldn't have considered him. However, Wuxia chose him because although he didn't have any talent, he was the most handsome among them and had the most prominent family background. Her snobbish eyes couldn't see through the barrier in the end. She planned to walk this path to the end. The matriarch looked at her deeply and finally took the booklet. She quietly sighed, "Fine. Since you've chosen him, I'll send someone to discuss the marriage." Wuxia leaned next to the matriarch and flipped through the pages as she said, "This isn't good. He just joined the Guan Fu and already has a group of concubines. With Wuxia's blockhead, wouldn't she be tortured to death? This is good. Although he's a bit older and comes from a poor family, he doesn't have any concubines. He doesn't even have a servant girl. In 4 years, he climbed from the head of the Tai Pu temple to the position of a magistrate in the capital. He relied on his own ability and is reliable. 6th-rank magistrate. If Mimi likes him, why don't you marry him yourself?" Wuxia sneered. Wuxia glanced at her and didn't bother to respond. The matriarch was angry and slammed the table, "Enough. Don't treat Xiang'er's good intentions as ill intent. If this person wasn't a relative of my eldest sister-in-law and had invited an Iceman to propose marriage, I wouldn't have considered him either. Fine. Since you like him, I won't stop you. However, if you get wronged after marrying him, don't tell me. Go back and prepare for the marriage." She still had to rely on the matriarch to arrange the dowry. Wuxia didn't dare to argue and resentfully left. The matriarch immediately sent people to discuss the marriage. In the afternoon, they exchanged marriage invitations. The next day, after finding someone to examine them and felt that they were suitable, they set up the marriage contract. In just a day and a half, Wuxia's marriage was decided. In the end, Wuxia was still unwilling to give up. She locked herself in her room and refused to eat or drink. When Yumyaochi heard the news, she personally made a box of pastries and went to visit. "You should at least eat some. If you hurt your body, other than yourself, who else would feel sorry for you?" Yumyaochi held a piece of cake and sent it to Wuxia's lips. Wuxia took a bite and sighed with tears in her eyes, "In this family, only my younger sister treats me the best. Sister, why don't you come back earlier? We sisters can spend more time together. What's the point of returning sooner or later? In any case, I'm superfluous." Yumyaochi's short sentence caused Wuxia to burst into tears. For a moment, she hated Wuxia and the matriarch even more. Yumyaochi continued, "Although I just came back not long ago and don't know much about the affairs of the mansion, I know that with my brother's power, you can at least marry into a count's mansion, a marquis mansion, or even a duke's mansion. But why are the candidates that grandmother found for you all shameful? Could it be that because Wuxia can't get married, she doesn't want you to marry well because she's afraid of poking her lung? Do big brother and grandmother treat you as family? Will I be the same in the future?" She tried her best to sow discord. Even if Wuxia was to get married, she had to make her hate Wuxia, Pinyin, and the matriarch. Perhaps she would be of use in the future. As expected, Wuxia was extremely angry when she heard this. She also felt that the two of them were in the same boat, so she hugged Yumyaochi and cried bitterly. Just at this moment, the Chiu clan rushed into the room. She didn't have time to pay her respects and shouted, eldest miss, it's not good. Feng Jichen is making a fuss outside. He said that he exchanged tokens with you a long time ago and privately pledged to marry you. He wants to sue the Marquis household for not keeping our promise and for one woman to marry twice. The old lady wants you to quickly go to the main hall to see her. You should hurry and tidy up. What? Exchange tokens, privately pledged to marry, one woman to marry twice. Nonsense, there's no such thing. Wuxia suddenly stood up and shouted. Because she was so shocked, even her voice changed. But in the next moment, she remembered the night they had met privately and confided in each other. Her angry expression turned into a guilty conscience. Even if the exchange of tokens wasn't true, privately pledging to marry someone couldn't be wrong. At that time, she really did have such thoughts and was caught red-handed by Wuxia. Now, even if she had 100 mouths, she wouldn't be able to explain herself. She was suddenly on the verge of collapsing. She was so shocked that she couldn't speak. With Yu Miaoqi's help, she barely managed to stabilize herself and staggered towards the main courtyard. Yu Miaoqi lowered her head slightly, and the corners of her mouth curved into a sly smile. At the same time, the Feng family's mother and son were making a big fuss at the entrance of the residence. The Pei clan kept saying that they had a marriage agreement with the Marquis household and would only propose marriage in the future. Feng Jichen even took out a pink dudu embroidered with Wuxia's name and showed it to the crowd. He said that Wuxia had personally given it to him as a token of their love and ordered him to keep it close to his body. The crowd suddenly burst into an uproar, and countless erotic scenes appeared in their minds. They were amazed by the unrestrained nature of the young miss of the Marquis household. The bodyguards guarding the gate wanted to go forward and grab the two, but the two quickly ran into the crowd, shouting as they ran, "Who doesn't know that Marquis Yongle is the living king of hell? He kills people without blinking an eye. If we are caught by you, how can we come out alive? We won't go, we definitely won't go. If the Marquis household is sincere, then come to my house to propose marriage and make this marriage agreement. Otherwise, we will go to the Marquis household and sue the Marquis household for one woman marrying two men and corrupting private morals. We are temporarily staying in the small courtyard opposite the fortune pastry shop in 100 Blossom Well Alley. Fellow villagers, please be our witnesses. If we die an unnatural death, we will definitely be silenced by the eternal joy Marquis Manor." The two ran and shouted, causing the crowd to point and gossip about the Marquis household. Seeing this, the two bodyguards could only give up on the idea of arresting them and go back to report to the old lady. Wuxia had just taken half a step into the threshold when she heard the old lady sternly shout, "Shameless thing, why aren't you kneeling down?" Wuxia's legs went soft and she knelt down. Then she went forward on her knees, kowtowing as she tried to explain, "Old ancestor, I really didn't exchange tokens with him. You must believe me. If you didn't exchange tokens, then why didn't you privately pledge to marry?" The old lady's face was ashen. "How many times have I told you? Why don't you listen to me? If you were willing to listen to a few words from me, how could you have ended up like this? You idiot! You've completely disgraced me, the Marquis Yongle." When she finished speaking, she fiercely threw the teacup on the ground, causing a loud bang. Yu Miaoqi hurriedly retreated a few steps and hid behind the Lin clan. She lowered her head, as if she was very afraid. Wuxia trembled like a sieve and shouted, "Old ancestor, granddaughter was possessed. Granddaughter knows she was wrong. You must not marry granddaughter off, otherwise." Before she could finish speaking, an old woman quickly ran in and whispered something into the old lady's ear. The old lady's ashen face gradually became distorted and ferocious. After she waved the old woman away, she gritted her teeth and laughed, "Good, good, good. You really are a shameless evil creature. You even gave away a personal item like your undergarment. You don't know, right?" Just now, Fang Jichen took out your undergarment and showed it to all the old and young men on the street. In less than half a day, you became famous. Are you happy now? When Wuxia heard this, she felt all the blood in her body rush to her head, almost bursting her already muddled brain. She immediately jumped up and screamed, "What undergarment? When did granddaughter ever give him an undergarment? Old ancestor, he's framing me. I've only met him once in private and exchanged a few words with him. I've never given him anything." She suddenly thought of something and revealed an expression of relief. She stepped forward and hugged the old lady's legs. She hurriedly said, "Wuxia was also there that night. Wuxia knows best what happened between Fang Jichen and I. Old ancestor, you'll know if you call Wuxia over and ask her. Get someone to call her over." She did prepare a keepsake for Fang Jichen that night, but it was a high-quality jade pendant, not an undergarment. If Wuxia hadn't appeared in time, she would have given it away. Now that she thought about it, it was really a blessing in disguise. There was only one thing, and that was that Wuxia had to tell the truth. Thinking of this, Wuxia's heart, which had just been relieved, was lifted high again. She regretted always going against Wuxia. If she held a grudge against her, she could have knocked her down the abyss with just a few words. The old lady kicked her away and coldly snorted, "Why did you call Xiang'er over? To sully her ears? Do you think there aren't enough people who know about your scandals?" Wuxia fell to the ground, her heart dead. She didn't expect the sound of a wheelchair turning outside the door, followed by a clear voice. Xiang'er came uninvited. Please forgive her, old ancestor. She was pushed to the old lady by two strong women. She didn't mix any personal feelings with her statement. Since older sister asked me to be a witness, I'll be a witness. That night, older sister only exchanged a few words with Fang Jichen and didn't exchange any keepsakes. As for the private pledge of marriage, it was a bit interesting, but I happened to interrupt, so it didn't happen. Fang Jichen's actions are to ruin older sister's reputation in order to get close to the Marquis family. His actions are despicable. Old ancestor, you mustn't let older sister marry such a person. Wuxia was stunned. She didn't expect Wuxia to speak up for her. Yu Miaoqi pinched the Lin clan. The Lin clan seemed to wake up from a dream and slowly said, "But now that things have gotten out of hand, if we don't let Siyu marry him, how are we going to deal with it? Are we really going to kill that mother and son? The entire capital has its eyes on the Marquis family. If something happens to them, won't Yandere be attacked by the imperial censors? Not only can we not touch them now, we have to protect them and resolve this matter in the shortest time possible." As for whether Siyu is innocent or not, there's no point in arguing about it now. The Lin clan's words were very reasonable. The old lady revealed a thoughtful expression. Wuxia also didn't speak. Only Wuxia's increasingly rapid breathing could be heard in the hall. She went forward on her knees and struggled desperately, "No, old ancestor, you can't let your granddaughter marry him. Don't forget, your granddaughter just got engaged and has a husband's family. My husband's family is also related to you by marriage. How are you going to explain this to them?" Just as she said this, Wan Qiu came in with a small booklet. He stuttered as he reported, "The old lady, the Li family returned eldest Mrs. marriage certificate and engagement letter. They said that they didn't dare to accept such a daughter-in-law for fear of tarnishing their family's reputation." Wuxia felt as if she had been struck by lightning. She was completely speechless. She was like a dying fish that had sunk into the mudflat, desperately puffing out her chest in an attempt to find a way to survive. Suddenly, a series of light laughter sounded. It was Wuxia's merciless ridicule that cut her into pieces. She regretted her past actions. Look at older sister's taste. The first one is despicable and shameless, and the second one is treacherous, kicking a person when he's down. I already told you not to be blinded by the riches in front of you. Why didn't you listen? Today's ending is also because of older sister's own doing. Pitiful, sad, but also hateful. She pinched the brocade quilt so hard that it started to crack. Exactly. Yu Miaoqi gently patted the back of her hand and continued, I believe that Jie is innocent and definitely wouldn't do such a thing. But how did her sister's undergarment end up in Fang Zhichen's hands? Who secretly gave it to him? His family has already fallen to the point where they can't even afford to eat, so where did they get the money to travel to the capital? They even rented a large courtyard with 3 entrances on 100 Blossom Well Lane. There are many tricks involved. Jie, please think about who you've offended that would harm you like this. You can't continue to be depressed and fall into that person's trap. When she finished speaking, she picked up the scissors as if she didn't mean it and gripped it tightly in her palm. She seemed to empathize with Wuxia and choked out, it's too bad that I just returned home and don't have any foundation. Otherwise, I would definitely help Jie find that person and restore Jie's reputation. With a crisp crack, the handkerchief in her hand was torn into 2 pieces and fluttered to the ground. Wuxia's eyes flashed slightly. She discreetly snatched the scissors back and turned to comfort her, good sister, it's good that you're considerate. I'll seek justice for myself. You're not her opponent. Jie knows who it is. Could it really be? Yu Miaoqi pretended to be shocked as she pointed towards the south courtyard. Who else could it be if not her? Could it be the old ancestor? You have to be careful after I leave. She's very sinister and vicious. Wuxia advised Yu Miaoqi patiently. Then, she ordered the maidservant to send Yu Miaoqi back. She changed her outer robe and combed her messy hair. Then, she hid a pair of scissors in her sleeve and went to the southern courtyard. The Chiu clan members saw the murderous look in her eyes. When they returned to the room, they discovered that a pair of scissors was missing from their sewing box. They hurriedly took a shortcut and ran to warn her. Wuxia stepped into the small courtyard with a heart full of resentment. She saw a group of old women and servant girls holding wooden planks used for flogging and glaring at her like tigers watching their prey. Her legs quickly turned to jelly. She forced herself to slowly walk into the room step by step. However, she saw Wuxia leaning on the couch and eating melon seeds. Her black and bright eyes lightly glanced at her. Her gaze was 3 parts pity and 7 parts sharpness. The Chiu clan members knelt at her feet and sneakily shrank into a corner. Good, it's you again, you old dog. Do you think that Wuxia is easy to get along with? She eats people up without spitting out the bones. Once you're no longer useful to her and find out about her dark secrets, she'll immediately kill you. Wuxia understood everything. Her face twisted as she cursed. She wanted nothing more than to skin the Chiu clan alive. That's enough. The Chiu clan is loyal to their master. It's just that you don't appreciate their kindness. Wuxia straightened up and slowly patted the shells of melon seeds off her skirt. She sighed and said, throw away the scissors in your sleeves. Otherwise, I'll have them break your arms. Do you believe me? As soon as she finished speaking, Tao Hong forcefully stomped the plank in his hand. The rest of the people looked over fiercely. Wuxia's fingers trembled as she threw away the scissors. The sharp blade almost pierced her foot. She was so frightened that she immediately broke out in a cold sweat. Wuxia leaned over with a languid smile on her face. She slowly said, word by word, why don't you tell me why the Chiu clan knows about my dark secrets and why I must kill her? You murdered your own clansmen and ruined my reputation. You're selfish, vicious, and morally corrupt. You're simply inhumane. Wuxia was a little guilty at first, but she gradually straightened her back as she spoke. Tell me in detail. How did you murder your own clansmen and ruin your reputation? Yu Xiang placed one hand on the soft pillow and gently propped up her cheek. Her large eyes sparkled as if she was very curious. Yu Xiu was a little flustered under her burning gaze. She secretly swallowed a mouthful of saliva and complained, "You were the one who sent this old dog to steal Fang Zhichen's undergarment, right? You were also the one who ordered the Fang clan's mother and son to cause trouble in the capital, weren't you? You were the one who paid for their travel expenses and the rent for their courtyard, weren't you? In order to harm me, you've really schemed." Yu Xiang seemed to have heard the funniest joke in the world. She immediately laughed so hard that the smock draped over her shoulders slipped off, revealing half of her snow-white arm. She didn't care about how seductive her appearance was. Her face suddenly darkened as she beckoned Yu Xiu with her index finger. "Come here." Her originally clear and melodious voice became a little hoarse, revealing a heavy and frightening sense of oppression. A few female servants with sticks stepped forward and made threatening gestures. The anger in Yu Xiu's chest was like a deflated balloon that hissed and disappeared completely. All that was left was a heart full of fear. She was extremely unwilling, but she couldn't control her footsteps. She inched forward bit by bit and stared timidly at Yu Xiang's gloomy face. Yu Xiang leaned forward and looked at her closely. Her sharp gaze was like a boneless steel knife that cut into her exposed flesh. Just as Yu Xiu couldn't take it anymore and wanted to retreat, Yu Xiang suddenly hooked her lips into a sneer and ruthlessly slapped her, causing her to fall to the ground. Yu Xiu was in pain. She covered her red and swollen cheek and growled, "You dare to hit me? You harmed me, and now you dare to hit me? The heavens are watching from above." Sooner or later, you'll suffer retribution. As she spoke, tears flowed out. At this moment, she felt extremely helpless. After fighting for so many years, even if she didn't want to face it, she had to admit that she was indeed jealous of Yu Xiang, but more than that, she was afraid. She liked to provoke her, but she was also afraid of angering her because she knew that she didn't have the ability to compete with Yu Xiang. But now, Yu Xiang seemed to be really angry. Yu Xiang was indeed bristling with anger. Her 5 fingers fiercely clasped Yu Xiu's chin and lifted her face up. She said word by word in a deep voice, "Yu Xiu, do you know that you're really stupid to the extreme? Today, I'll give you a clear path. Your duda was stolen by the second-ranked maidservant in your courtyard, Xue Cheng, who was in charge of washing in hairpins. She handed it over to Mama Kim, who then handed it over to her second son-in-law to take care of in Yangzhou. Her son-in-law hired a refugee to persuade the Fang family, saying that they were under my orders to ruin your reputation and that the bigger the matter, the better. Tell me, how did you offend Yu Miaoqi to make her set up such a vicious scheme to harm you for the rest of your life? Do you think that the antiques, jade wares, and even the farmstead you took from her were blown by the wind? On the surface, she's silent and obedient, but behind her back, she's itching to stab you to death." Yu Xiu listened in a daze. Bolts of lightning flashed through her mind, and she suddenly understood the last few words. How did she offend Yu Miaoqi? Wasn't it because she found out about her past? That's right, if she married in the capital, if she couldn't control her mouth one day and publicized her past, how could Yu Miaoqi maintain her standing? What's more, Yu Miaoqi used this secret to ask for things from her time and time again, and each item was priceless. It would be strange if Yu Miaoqi didn't hate her. If the two of them were in different positions, Yu Xiu would definitely be unable to eat or sleep in peace, and then rack her brains to deal with Yu Miaoqi. However, on second thought, she hesitated again. She put on a strong front and shouted, "Yu Xiang, you don't need to drive a wedge between us. She is gentle and treats people sincerely. She would never harm me. On the contrary, it's you who constantly squeezes me and forces me." Before she could finish speaking, Yu Xiang ruthlessly slapped her again. She used even more force to clasp her chin and sighed, "Why can't you wake up from your slaps? In this lifetime, you're living a life of helping others count their money even after being sold. For better or for worse, we've been together for so many years, so you should know a thing or two about my personality. I like to do things openly and don't like to play dirty tricks behind people's backs. Let me ask you, in all these years, have I ever tried to harm you behind your back? A trace of blood slowly seeped out of the corner of Yusiu's mouth. She frowned and thought for a moment, then reluctantly answered, never. Have I ever ordered the servants to make things difficult for you? After a moment of silence, she shook her head, never. Have I ever embezzled your allowance? The silence grew shorter and shorter, never. Have I ever made you lose face in front of outsiders? Never. That's because you would immediately make me lose face when you returned home. You didn't think too much about it. She thought deeply about Yu Xiang's questions and suddenly realized that other than the bit of unwillingness in her heart, her life had been very comfortable these years. Although the clothes she wore and the food she ate weren't expensive, they were still exquisite. She was much better off than the concubine daughters of other dukes, marquises, and counts. Moreover, she had never suffered from the disdain of the servants. It was just that the people of the Chiu clan were a bit annoying, but most of the time, they would bow and scrape and bury themselves in work. They had never been insolent in front of her. Although Yu Xiang had a sharp tongue and would occasionally beat her down, she had never done anything behind her back. She liked and disliked. She never pretended to be herself. She wasn't like Yu Miaoqi, that two-faced trash. As the memories became clearer and clearer, Yu suddenly felt speechless. So it turned out that she had lived quite well these years. Yu Xiang let go of her bruised jaw and sneered, moreover, if I wanted to harm you, I would have urged you to quickly marry into the Fong family. Why would I stop you time and time again? If you had married into the Fong family, you would now be a married woman of the Fong family. You would also have had a share of the calamity of having your estate confiscated. A few days in prison would have been considered a light punishment. The heavier punishment would have been that you would be sent to be a slave and your dowry confiscated. Where did your arrogance come from? You came to my door with a pair of scissors. I treated you with good intentions, but you treated it as a sneak attack. Yu Miaoqi tried to win you over on the surface but tried to harm you behind your back. You were so close to her and your sisterhood was deep. Tell me yourself, are you stupid or not? What's the use of your pair of hands? You might as well dig them out. These words were simply too reasonable. She couldn't find any flaws in them. Yu muttered to herself for a long time. Suddenly, she covered her face and wept. She squeezed out a few words from her throat, I'm stupid. I really don't know people well. If she had really stabbed Yu Xiang today, she was afraid that Big Brother would have immediately thrown her to the Fong family and cut off all contact with her. Yu Miaoqi was indeed a good schemer. Chapter 68. Yu hated Yu Miaoqi as much as she liked her in the past. She wasn't like Yu Xiang, who would explode on the spot. Instead, she buried it deep in her heart and schemed over and over again, then thought of a way to secretly take revenge. It was fine if she took revenge, but she actually wanted you to be grateful to her. To put it bluntly, this was like a whore trying to maintain her chastity. Yu Miaoqi was a whore, a complete whore. Yu thought of how affectionate she usually was when she called her sister, and she was so disgusted that she almost threw up the dinner she had last night. Looking at Yu Xiang's arrogant and despotic face, she didn't seem as annoying as before. She stopped crying and was about to get up and leave, but then she paused and asked in exasperation, that's not right. Since you already knew about her schemes, why didn't you stop her earlier? If you were willing to help, would I have fallen to this state today? Great. She was almost fooled. So this one wasn't a good person either. Yu was so angry that her whole body was trembling, and the little bit of good feeling she had for Yu Xiang was annihilated. Yu Xiang seemed to have heard the funniest joke in the world. She covered her mouth and laughed. Seeing Yu's face turn from green to purple and her nose crooked from anger, Yu Xiang slowly said, "These things were all caused by you and Yu Miaoqi, so why should I help? Let me ask you, if the two of us exchanged places, would you help me? I'm afraid that not only would you not help me, but you would also kick me when I'm down and make me even more miserable." Yu was stumped by the question and lowered her head guiltily. Indeed, not only would she not help Yu Xiang, but she would also step on her and watch her struggle in pain and despair. Even if she didn't want to admit it, Yu Xiang knew it clearly in her heart. Buddhism emphasizes karma and retribution. You will reap what you sow in the past. I will treat you how you treat me. You should be grateful that I didn't take the opportunity to throw you into purgatory. What right do you have to criticize me? Yu Xiang slowly leaned back on the soft couch, raised her fair and slender fingers, and admired the freshly applied nail polish under the sunlight. What she said was too reasonable. Not only was Yu unable to refute it, she actually felt grateful that she didn't take advantage of the situation. From the looks of it, Yu Xiang had a good personality other than his poisonous mouth. He had never schemed against others behind their backs. If he had been on good terms with her back then, he wouldn't have ended up like this. Yu's heart was full of regret, but she still forced herself to ask, "Even if you don't help me, you have to think about the reputation of the Marquis family, right? If the reputation of the Marquis family is ruined, which one of you will benefit?" Do you know the saying, "No egg can remain intact and the nest is overturned"? Yu Xiang chuckled. What does the reputation of the Marquis household have to do with me? Man said that I don't want to get married, and even older brother doesn't care. The only person in this household who still thinks about the reputation of the family is the old ancestor. Because of older brother's special position, the Marquis family didn't even have enough time to tarnish their reputation, so how could they care about maintaining a good reputation? If your reputation is good, you make friends with more people, and you have more influence, what would the emperor want you for? In the blink of an eye, the butcher's knife will be hung over the Marquis Yongla. Thinking about how older brother massacred his family, Yu was speechless for a moment. In front of Yu Xiang, her tongue was just a decoration. Yu Xiang flicked her fingernails and continued, "You've also been taught a lesson, so I'll teach you a good lesson. In the future, don't just look at people on the surface. Buddha said, lies, beautiful words, two tongues, evil mouth, killing people without blood, are all very evil. Take a look at how many of Yu Miaoqi's replies, and you'll understand what kind of person she is. Even so, you still dare to be so close to her. I really admire your courage." Yu carefully pondered these words and felt her hair stand on end. She thought, old ancestor always said that Yu Xiang's knowledge was extraordinary and her eyes were penetrating. It turns out that it wasn't an exaggeration. If I had 1 or 2 parts of her knowledge, how could I have been played around by that little slut Yu Miaoqi? Her anger and hatred were provoked to the extreme. She raised her head and asked, "Yu Miaoqi schemed against me, but she also used your name. Why don't the two of us work together to deal with her?" Yu Xiang narrowed her cat eyes and said carelessly, "I don't need to deal with her. Older brother will naturally find trouble with her when he comes back. If you want to clear your name, think of a way yourself. Don't use me as a tool." Yu's face turned red. She tried to persuade her for a long time, but Yu didn't waver. In the end, she left resentfully. Her face no longer had the deep hatred from before. Instead, she looked a little ashamed. The Chiu clan followed her out and explained in a low voice, "Eldest miss, this servant was afraid that you would make a big mistake, so this servant ran to report it. Please don't hold a grudge against this servant. Although Miss Three's mouth is a bit poisonous, it's all for your own good. Just listen to her advice and don't be so stubborn." When the Marquis comes back in the evening, you should tidy yourself up and beg him. He's your older brother, so how could he not care about you? Although Miss Three's mouth is poisonous, it's all for your own good. The Chiu clan had said this countless times before, but Yu Siu had always snorted. It was only today that she truly understood that Yu Xiang had never harmed her. Instead, she had always been scheming for her. She could only blame herself for coming to her senses too late. She was too ashamed to speak, so she lowered her head and scurried away. After the master and servant had walked far away, Lulu couldn't help but say, "Miss, eldest Miss is right. If you had acted earlier, how could second Miss still be alive?" Yu Xiang shook her head and sighed, "Do you think I didn't want to act? She hurt someone and then poured dirty water on me. I wanted to strangle her with my own hands. But now is not the time. She has something on me, something that could be used against me." That's right. Yu Miaoqi's background was her biggest worry, and it was the same for Yu Xiang. Not to mention whether there would be estrangement between her and Yu Pinyin after the mystery of her background was solved, the servants in the residence could drown her with a spit of saliva. At that time, if the Lin clan insisted on sending her away, she wouldn't have the face to insist on not leaving. Her identity as the legitimate daughter of the prefecture Yu was her biggest advantage, so she naturally had to grasp it tightly. If she pushed Yu Miaoqi too hard, she would reveal her background. It would hurt her by 1,000, but also hurt herself by 800. Yu Xiang would also fall into a very awkward situation. Therefore, it would be best if she could avoid bloodshed. Since it was something that could be used against her, Lulu didn't dare to ask any more questions. Tao Hong was so scared that he covered his mouth. The master and servants were quiet for a moment before they began to gossip again. However, a servant girl came in from outside and reported in a low voice, "Miss Three, Mama Chiu asked this servant to pass on a message to you. Eldest Miss sent people to the countryside to catch snow. The matter is very big, so the main house must have been alerted. If the main house was alerted, they would naturally destroy the evidence. Mama Kim's second son-in-law was very good at handling matters. When he went to Yangzhou, he disguised himself so that no one recognized his face. When he contacted the Fong family's mother and son, he also hired a refugee. After he was done, he sent the refugee away. Yu Xiang ordered people to search, but they were a step too late. The refugee had already disappeared. The last place he was seen was by the Yangtze River in Guazhou town. It was very likely that he had been killed and then thrown into the river. Because Mama Kim's son-in-law had been in the army before, his methods were very ruthless. This time, he used the excuse of breaking his leg and going home to recuperate. As soon as he came back from Yangzhou, he smashed his own leg. During this time, his younger brother pretended to be him and lay in bed moaning. The neighbors were all witnesses. Therefore, the snowfall became the only way to break through. This matter couldn't be said to be perfect, but it could be considered very beautiful. If Yu Xiang hadn't sent people early on to monitor the main house's every move, they really wouldn't have been able to find any evidence against Yu Miaoqi. However, Yu Xiang gave Yu Siu the evidence that could be used against her, and she was still able to mess it up. She could be considered extremely stupid. Yu Xiang pressed the bulging veins on his forehead back down one by one. He gritted his teeth and said, "Pig teammate. There's no pig teammate who's worse than Yu Siu. She didn't even know how to catch someone quietly. She had to make such a big fuss. If the person ran away, what would she use to clear her name? Miss, please calm down. Even if she messed up, would Master Ho suspect you? How could Master Ho not know what kind of personality you have?" Lulu quickly stepped forward and patted her back. Tao Hong quickly made a cup of honey tea and served it to her. However, when Yu Miaoqi heard that Yu Siu sent people to catch the snowfall, she didn't panic at all. Instead, she covered her mouth and smiled slyly. The snowfall was her second trap. She had already sent people to write down Snowfall's theft on a piece of paper and stuff it into Yusiu's dowry. When Yusiu suddenly attacked, she thought that it was because she saw the note and didn't think that it was related to Yuxiang. Yusiu sent people to catch the snowfall while standing guard outside the second door. When she saw Yu Pinyan's tall figure against the light, she quickly knelt down and kowtowed. "Don't kowtow." Yu Pinyan walked past her to the study and said calmly, "I don't care if you ruin the reputation of the Marquis household. I only know that my little sister can't marry that kind of despicable person. You should go back. This matter will be resolved in less than 5 days. After that, you can go to the countryside and hide for a year or 2 at most, or 7 or 8 at least. I'll bring you back to get married." Yu Pinyan was a man of few words, but as long as he made a promise, he would do it. Yusiu cried tears of gratitude. She increasingly felt that she had been blinded by lard. How could she have thought that her big brother didn't treat her well? On the contrary, because of the rumors outside the Fu, she was afraid of him and alienated him. Later on, when they met, she would only nod and greet him. Yuxiang wasn't affected in the slightest. No matter how much blood her big brother brought back, she would happily throw herself into his arms and chatter nonstop. Every time this happened, her big brother's face would reveal an indescribable gentleness. He was good to Yuxiang because of Yuxiang's sincerity, right? Yusiu suddenly felt that she had lived for the past 16 years in vain. It wasn't until today that she had truly opened her eyes to the world. Compared to the muddle-headedness of the Lin clan, she wasn't inferior. The mother and son of the Fong clan hurriedly left Marquis Yomla. They found a restaurant on the street and swaggered in. They ordered a table full of good dishes and a sumptuous meal. They also bought a lot of cloth, pastries, and wine before leisurely returning to 100 Flowers Well Lane. The courtyard they rented wasn't large and the decorations weren't exquisite. In the past, they would have looked down on it, but now it was like living in heaven. If they married Yusiu, with the backing of the Marquis of Yonla, it wouldn't be a delusion to earn back the scholarly achievements they had lost. The mother and son drank as they imagined the future. They had long forgotten that person's words to them to quickly flee far away after marrying Yusiu. After drinking until he was half drunk, Fang Jichen burped. He stood up and walked towards the door. "Mother, I'm going back to rest. You should also sleep early. Who knows, maybe the prefecture you will come early in the morning to discuss marriage." "I know. You can go." The Pei clan waved their hands and slowly knocked their heads on the table. Fang Jichen returned to his room with his head heavy and his feet light. He closed the door and was about to roll onto the bed when he suddenly saw 2 dark figures, one sitting and one standing at the table. He was so frightened that he lost his voice and screamed. The Pei clan had already fallen asleep on the table. They didn't hire any servants in the courtyard, so his scream didn't attract anyone's attention. The author has something to say: "Thank you to my rich friends, and thank you to all the friends who supported the original version." Moi. You're tuning into the Han Li's Wuxia Chronicles YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.